They summoned me with zero magic, so according to this kingdom, I was useless. But they made one mistake. Their entire world runs on turns. Knights wait for commands. Mages freeze after casting. Nobles cannot even finish insulting you until the dialogue box moves on. And me, I was not in the turn order. The prince laughed when my status showed no class, no mana, and no blessing. Then he ordered a nervous knight to cut me down for entertainment. The knight raised his sword. A battle menu appeared, everyone stopped moving. I blinked, then I simply walked out of the arena. I stole the king's crown, tied the prince's boots together, ate half the royal banquet, and walked right back before anyone took their first action. To them, I vanished. To me, they were all just standing there like badly programmed NPCs. When time moved again, the prince fell flat on his face. The king screamed for his crown, and the system announced the impossible. Duel result, invalid, winner, 0. That was the day this world learned something terrifying. I had no magic, but I did not need magic. Because while everyone else was waiting for their turn, I was already behind them. Of course, none of that made sense to me at first. One moment, I was standing between the shelves of an old library, holding a leather book that smelled like dust and rain. The next, white light swallowed my vision, the floor disappeared under my sneakers, and I dropped straight into the center of a marble hall. 100 people stared down at me. They wore silk robes, gold shoulder plates, jeweled crowns, and expressions that made me want to check whether I had stepped into a private theater rehearsal. Then a blue screen opened above my head. Name 0 and class none. Mana output 0, blessing none, contribution value 0. The hall went silent. For 3 seconds nobody moved, then the laughter started. It did not begin with the king. The king only leaned back on his throne and narrowed his eyes like a merchant who had just opened an expensive box and found a dead rat inside. The first laugh came from the young man standing beside him. He had bright red hair, a white military coat, and the kind of smile only a person born important could wear without getting punched. Prince Caldrus, I did not know his name yet, but I understood his type immediately. He stepped forward, looked at my screen, and covered his mouth like he was trying very hard to be polite. 0 mana, he said. A little box appeared beside his face. Prince Caldrus, 0 mana. I stared at it. The words hovered in the air, neat and glowing, like the world had decided subtitles were mandatory. Caldrus continued, Father, did we really spend 3 national relics summoning a defective commoner? Another dialogue box appeared. A few nobles laughed louder. I looked from the prince to the box to the frozen smiles of the court, then back to the prince. Sorry, I said. Is the floating text normal, or am I having a very specific concussion? No one answered. Apparently, it was not my line. A court mage hurried forward with a crystal staff in his hands. He scanned my body, then scanned the screen again. His face turned pale. Your Majesty, he said, there is no mana reaction, none at all. The nobles stopped laughing for a moment. Then they laughed even harder. One woman in a blue dress actually dabbed at the corner of her eye. No mana at all. How does he breathe? Does he even count as a person under the round law? Maybe he can be used as a training dummy. I took one slow breath. The air smelled like candle smoke, polished stone, and rich people who had never been told no. I wanted to ask where I was. I wanted to ask how to get home. But Caldrus raised one hand before I could speak. I have an idea, he said. Since the summon is useless, let us at least turn this embarrassment into entertainment. He snapped his fingers. A side door opened and a young knight walked into the hall. He could not have been much older than me. His armor was too clean, his helmet was tucked under one arm, and his hand kept tightening around the grip of his sword like he wished it was not there. He looked at me, then looked away. Caldrus smiled wider. Knight Apprentice Rowan, he said, draw your blade, test the failed summon. The young knight stiffened. My prince, he said carefully, he appears unarmed. A dialogue box appeared above him too. Knight Apprentice Rowan, my prince, he appears unarmed. Caldrus's smile thinned. Then do not swing too hard, we only need the court to see reality. The message was clear. If the knight refused, he would be punished. If he obeyed, I would be the one punished. I raised both hands. Hold on, I did not agree to a duel. The court ignored me. The marble floor under my feet lit up with a glowing circle. Lines of blue light crawled outward, forming a square arena. A translucent wall rose around the boundary. The young knight stepped into the opposite side. A large window appeared between us. Battle start, registered units. When I stared at the number 1. The knight raised his sword with both hands. A command menu appeared in front of him. Attack, defend, skill, item, and run. The knight's eyes trembled. His hand moved toward attack, slow and reluctant. Then the world stopped, not slowed, stopped. The knight stood frozen with one finger hovering near the command. The nobles sat with their mouths open in the middle of laughs. The king's sleeve hung in the air as he reached for his goblet. Caldrus had one eyebrow lifted, trapped in a perfect expression of smug boredom. I looked around. Hello, no answer. I waved my hand in front of Rowan's face. Nothing. I walked to the edge of the glowing arena and pressed one finger against the translucent wall. It shimmered, but it did not push me back, so I stepped through it. The moment my foot crossed the boundary, another window blinked above the arena. Warning, active combatant has left designated area. I turned and looked at the frozen knight. Active combatant? I said, buddy, I am not even on the list. That was when the first bad idea entered my head. I walked up the steps to the throne. The king was still frozen with his fingers around a golden cup. His crown sat on his head, heavy, sharp, and extremely stealable. I lifted it off carefully. No alarm, divine lightning, and royal curse, just a very expensive hat in my hands. I placed it on my own head, too big, I adjusted it anyway. Then I saw a plate of roasted meat and fruit on the royal table. I had no idea whether food from another world was safe, but at that point, I had been kidnapped by a magic circle and insulted by subtitles. I deserved grapes. I ate 3, then 5. Then I picked up a small golden seal sitting beside the king's plate. It had the royal crest pressed into its face and looked important enough that someone would miss it later. I turned it over in my palm. Probably useful, I muttered and slipped it into my pocket. After that, I walked down to Caldrus. He was still frozen with that smug little smile. The urge to punch him was strong, but the urge to make him look stupid was stronger. I crouched, grabbed the laces on his polished white boots, and tied them together in the tightest knot I could manage. Then I stood, thought about it, and tied the ends to the leg of his own decorative sword belt. Perfect. I walked back through the arena wall and stood where I had started. System was still blinking. Warning, active combatant has left designated area. I raised one hand. Can I, return to designated area? The warning vanished. The world moved again. Rowan finished pressing attack. He stepped forward with the most unwilling sword swing I had ever seen. Then he stopped because I was wearing the king's crown. The king's hand reached the top of his own head and found nothing. Caldrus tried to step forward. His boots refused, belt pulled, and body leaned. For one beautiful second, the entire royal court watched their prince fight a losing battle against his own shoes. Then he hit the marble floor face first. The hall went silent. A grape rolled off the royal table and bounced once beside his cheek. The system window above the arena flashed violently. Combat boundary violation detected. Action target unresolved. Duel timer expired. Result invalid and winner 0. No one breathed. Then the king stood so fast his chair slammed backward. My crown, I touched the crown on my head. Found it. The silence broke. Nobles shouted at once. Some pointed at me, some pointed at Caldrus. One old man made a sign over his chest like he had just watched a demon crawl out of the soup. The young knight lowered his sword and stared at me with wide eyes. He looked terrified, not of me, of what would happen now. That told me enough. I lifted the crown off my head and tossed it lightly back toward the throne. It landed crooked on the king's cushion. Relax, I said. I was borrowing it. Caldrus pushed himself up on one elbow. His face had gone red from more than the fall. You, his voice shook. You trash summon. What did you do? A dialogue box appeared. Prince Caldrus, you trash summon. What did you do? I looked at the floating words, then at his boots and back at him. I think your tutorial is broken. The insult landed better than I expected. Caldrus ripped at his laces, failed to untie them, and had to cut himself free with a dagger from his belt. The nobles around him tried not to look at his shoes. That only made it worse. At the side of the hall, a girl in a pale healer's robe stared at me. She had silver blonde hair tied low behind her neck and a tray of bandages clutched against her chest. Unlike the nobles, she was not laughing. Unlike the guards, she was not reaching for a weapon. She looked confused, and maybe a little relieved. I would learn her name later, Leora, and for now, all I knew was that she was the only person in the hall who had looked worried for the night before the duel started. Caldrus finally staggered upright. This is forbidden movement magic, he snapped. It has to be. No one leaves a battle boundary before the first action. No one. An older man near the throne did not answer. He wore dark blue robes lined with silver thread. His hair was long, his eyes were sharp, and unlike everyone else, he had stopped looking at me like a joke. He had opened a book of floating pages in front of him. Each page showed names, portraits, and tiny bars of light. The old man's gaze moved from the list to me. Then back to the list. His expression changed. Not fear, interest. That was worse. Your Highness, he said slowly, I do not detect teleportation mana. Caldrus whipped toward him. Archmage Velmorin, are you blind? He vanished. I saw that. Velmorin's eyes narrowed, but the round index never registered him as a unit. The hall quieted. Even I stopped smiling for a second. Round index and unit. Velmorin lifted one hand and a larger panel opened above the arena. Registered participants, Knight Apprentice Rowan. That was it. One name, the knight's name, not mine. Velmorin looked directly at me. He was physically present, he said, but he was never assigned initiative. The nobles started murmuring. I understood almost none of it, but I understood enough. Their system had counted the knight, it had counted the duel, it had counted the boundary, it had counted the results, it had not counted me. Caldrus pointed at me with a shaking finger. Seize him. The nearest guards hesitated. Caldrus's voice rose. I said seize him. the hesitation vanished. Armored soldiers stepped forward from both sides of the hall, spears lowered, shields lifted, boots struck the marble in perfect rhythm. A new set of windows appeared above their heads. Royal Guard A, awaiting command. Royal Guard B, awaiting command. Royal Guard C, awaiting command. Turn order calculating. I looked at the glowing bars, then at the guards, then at Caldress, who was still holding the remains of his bootlaces. A slow smile spread across my face. Oh, I said, so it works on groups too. The guards froze in perfect formation, not because they were afraid, because their menu had opened. Royal Guard A / Royal Guard B, shield advance. Royal Guard C, spear thrust. Royal Guard D. Restrain target. 4 command boxes floated above them, each one waiting for the world's invisible hand to press confirm. I looked at the glowing turn bars. Then at Prince Caldress, then at the guards again. For a second I almost felt bad. They looked serious. Their armor was polished, their shields were raised, and their faces carried the stiff loyalty of people who had been trained not to ask questions. But then I remembered they were about to seize me because a spoiled prince had fallen over his own feet. So my sympathy lasted about half a breath. The first guard's command flashed. Action confirmed. / his sword started moving. At least it tried to. Before the blade could finish its path, I stepped aside, walked around him, and gently turned his shoulders to the left. The world resumed. His sword swung straight into the shield of the second guard. A sharp clang rang through the hall. Both men jolted. The second guard's command resolved a heartbeat later. Shield advance. Unfortunately, I had already tilted his shield down and hooked the bottom rim under the first guard's belt. He lunged forward. The first guard came with him. They both stumbled 3 steps, collided with a decorative pillar, and dropped into a kneeling heap. The nobles gasped. I nodded. Good teamwork. The third guard's spear thrust began. I walked up to him, lifted the spear tip, aimed it carefully through the loop of a hanging banner rope, and stepped away. The spear shot forward. The banner rope snapped tight. A massive royal banner dropped from the ceiling and landed over 3 guards behind him. The fourth guard shouted, "Formation break." His dialogue box appeared half a second after the problem had already happened. Royal Guard D, formation break. I looked at the box. Little late, more guards rushed in from the side doors. The floor lit again. Turn order calculating. Registered units, 18. Unregistered movement detected. The warning flickered once, then vanished like the system was embarrassed. 18 armored soldiers surrounded me in a half circle. Their spears pointed inward, their shields locked together. A red targeting line connected each weapon to my chest. For a moment the image looked dangerous, then every guard stopped moving, command pending. Please wait for active unit. I walked through the forest of spears like I was browsing a poorly arranged furniture store. One spear got moved 2 inches to the right. One shield got rotated backward. One helmet got turned around so the guard would be staring at the inside of his own visor. I took the dagger from one soldier's belt and placed it in another soldier's empty scabbard. I switched 2 shields. I lifted one guard's foot and set it gently behind the ankle of the man beside him. Then I returned to the center of the formation and waited. The commands resolved in order. / block, advance, restrain, and thrust. Every action went wrong at once. A sword hit the wrong shield. A spear slid between 2 helmets and pinned a cloak to the wall. A guard tried to block with a shield that now belonged to the man behind him. 3 men tripped over each other. The soldier whose helmet had been reversed confidently charged 2 steps in the wrong direction and ran into a banquet table. A mountain of armor collapsed with a noise like someone dropping a kitchen full of pots. System windows popped above them. Target position mismatch. Formation integrity failed. Action resolved against nearest valid unit. Friendly collision detected. I winced. Nearest valid unit sounds personal. By the end of the round, half the Royal Guard was piled in the middle of the court like a metal sculpture titled Bad Decisions. Not one of them looked seriously hurt. That was the important part. I was not trying to kill anyone. I was trying to make a point. Unfortunately, the court was full of people too proud to understand points unless they hit the floor face first. Caldress stared at the guard pile. His face had gone from red to white to an impressive shade of purple. "This is impossible," he whispered. A dialogue box appeared. "Prince Caldress, this is impossible." I pointed at it. "See, even the box agrees you're having a hard time." The prince snapped, "Enough, bring the executioner." The hall went quiet. Even the guards struggling under the banner stopped moving. A side gate opened. A tall man in black armor stepped out, carrying a broad silver sword across both hands. His helmet covered his face completely, but the slow weight of his steps made the nobles move back without being told. The girl in the healer robe went pale. Liara. I still did not know her name, but I noticed the way her fingers tightened around the bandage tray. The nervous knight Rowan took 1 step forward. "My prince," he said, voice strained. The duel already ended. Caldress did not even look at him. "Silence!" The word landed like a command. Rowan froze, not from fear this time, but from the law of the room itself. A small gray box appeared above him. Court order, remain silent. I did not like that. The executioner stopped at the edge of the arena. A red prompt opened in front of the throne. Execute, failed summon, confirm, and cancel. The king's hand lifted toward confirm. Everyone waited. Of course they did. Apparently even murder needed menu navigation here. The king's finger moved. The world slowed into stillness again. I walked over to the executioner. Up close, the sword was heavier than it looked. I lifted it carefully, turned it once, and studied the edge. Very dramatic, I said, then I carried it across the hall. Cauldress stood frozen near the fallen banner, one bootlace still frayed from my earlier work. I crouched, used the executioner's sword to slice the other lace cleanly, and tied the two cut ends to the decorative tassel hanging from his coat. Then I walked back to the executioner. I put the sword back into his hands. Backwards, the world resumed. The king pressed confirm. The red window flashed. Execution command accepted. The executioner raised his sword, or tried to. The blade twisted awkwardly in his grip because it was facing the wrong direction. He paused just long enough for another system window to appear. Weapon orientation invalid. Action delayed. Cauldress tried to step forward and shout something heroic. His coat yanked his boot. His body jerked sideways. For the second time that day, the prince lost a fight against clothing. He did not fall as hard this time. He caught himself on one knee. That might have saved some dignity if every noble in the court had not watched it happen. I glanced at the execution prompt. Your execution system has terrible quality control. The king slammed his hand on the armrest of his throne. Archmage Velmorin had not stopped studying the floating pages. His expression was sharper now. A large blue panel opened above his book, showing names, classes, mana outputs, and turn positions. King, Prince Cauldress, Knight Apprentice Rowan, Royal Guard units, Court Mage units, Executioner, Leora. Even the servants along the walls had names in the list. I was not there. Velmorin slowly raised his eyes. Still absent, he said. Cauldress snapped, then at him. Velmorin did not blink. That is not how the round index works. Then force it. I tried. The court went silent again. Velmorin turned one page. No class root, mana signature, blessing source, curse source, spatial displacement, and acceleration magic. No stealth technique and divine concealment. His gaze landed on me, physically present, systemically absent. I gave him a small wave. That sounds unhealthy. It is impossible, he said. People keep saying that. The king's eyes narrowed. If he cannot be registered, he cannot be allowed outside this hall. That sounded like my cue to leave. Two fresh guards moved toward the doors. Their commands appeared, and the doors began glowing with royal lock symbols. Leora suddenly stepped closer to me. She did it quietly, almost by accident, like her body had moved before her courage could stop it. Run, she whispered. A tiny dialogue box appeared above her. Leora, run. The word was so small compared to the prince's commands and the king's execution prompt. But it was the first useful thing anyone in this world had said to me. Cauldress heard it. His head turned. You, he said. Leora flinched. Cauldress's smile returned, colder this time. A servant healer speaking out of turn. After this is over, I will have your action rights sealed for a month. Leora's face went completely still. I did not know what action rights were. I did know what a threat sounded like. A dialogue box appeared beside Cauldress. Prince Cauldress, a servant healer speaking out of turn. Before the rest of his sentence could continue, I moved. The court froze. I stepped behind Leora, gently took the tray from her shaking hands and set it on a nearby table. Then I moved her 3 steps back, behind me, where the nearest guards would have to go through me first. I returned to where I had been standing. The world resumed. Cauldress finished his threat. After this is over, I will have your action rights sealed for a month. Then he realized Leora was no longer where he had been looking. She stood behind me, eyes wide. I looked at Cauldress. No, the prince stared. What did you say? No, I repeated. You do not get to punish someone for warning me your execution menu is stupid. For the first time, I did not smile. The hall felt different after that. The joke was still there. The absurd boxes, the frozen nobles, the backward sword, the prince tangled in his own coat. But underneath all of it, something uglier had shown itself. This world did not only make people wait in battle. It made them wait to speak, wait to move and matter, and the people at the top liked it that way. The palace doors finished glowing, royal lock engaged, registered authority required. I looked at the 2 guards standing beside the door. A prompt hovered between them. Open gate. Authorized guard confirmation required. The guards were still waiting for their turn. I walked over, took one guard's hand, pressed his palm to the glowing panel, and patted his shoulder. Thanks. The lock turned green. The palace doors opened. Behind me, the king shouted for someone to stop me. Cauldress shouted louder. Velmorin said nothing. Rowan lowered his sword. Leora stood frozen, not by the system this time, but by shock. I stepped through the open doors and into the sunlight. A final window appeared in the corner of my vision. Authority attention increased. Anomaly classification pending. I looked back at the royal hall one last time. The guards were still tangled in armor. The executioner was still trying to rotate his sword properly. The prince was still attached to his own coat. Then I looked ahead. Beyond the palace stairs stretched a massive capital city of white towers, crowded streets, moving patrols, and floating signs. Everywhere I looked, people walked in clean little paths, stopping, starting, and waiting. A shopkeeper at the bottom of the stairs turned toward me with a bright professional smile. A dialogue box opened above his head. "Welcome, traveler. What would you like to?" I walked past him before the sentence finished. The shopkeeper froze mid-smile. I stopped, turned around, looked at him, then looked at the city. "Oh," I said, "this is going to be fun." The shopkeeper stayed frozen with one hand raised. His smile did not twitch. His eyes did not blink. The dialogue box above his head still glowed in the sunlight. "Welcome, traveler. What would you like to?" I took one step back. Nothing changed. I took 3 steps forward. Still nothing. The man remained locked in place like a statue that had spent its entire life practicing customer service. I looked down the palace stairs. The capital spread out beneath me in layers of white stone, red rooftops, floating signs, and roads packed with people. Carriages rolled along the main street. Guards marched past fountains. Vendors waved customers toward stalls. Children ran between market carts. At first glance, it looked normal. Then I watched more closely. A guard at the corner walked exactly 12 steps, turned left, waited 2 seconds, then walked exactly 12 steps back. A fruit seller lifted an apple, smiled, said a greeting, waited, then repeated the same motion for the next person. A noble carriage stopped at an intersection. Everyone else waited until the carriage rolled through, even though half of them could have crossed safely. It was not just the palace. The whole city moved like it was following invisible commands. I slowly turned back to the frozen shopkeeper. "You are really going to stay like that?" He continued smiling. The dialogue box continued waiting. "Welcome, traveler. What would you like to?" I waved a hand in front of his face. No response. I leaned closer and whispered, "Blink twice if customer service is a prison." Still nothing. A voice behind me hissed, "What did you do to him?" I turned. The healer girl from the court stood halfway down the palace steps, breathing hard like she had run through half the building to catch me. Her pale robe was slightly crooked, the bandage tray was gone, and her silver blonde hair had loosened around her face. Leora, I only knew her name because the round index had shown it earlier. She looked from me to the shopkeeper, then back to me. "Please tell me you did not curse a merchant 5 minutes after escaping the palace." "I did not curse him." "Then why is he frozen?" I think I walked away during his greeting. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "You walked away during a shop prompt? Was I supposed to fill out a form?" Leora hurried to the shopkeeper and checked his pulse at his wrist. Apparently he still had one. That was good. "He is not injured," she whispered. "He is transaction locked." "That sounds like a terrible job benefit." "It is not supposed to happen," she said. "A customer either buys, refuses, or leaves after the dialogue closes. The prompt resolves, the merchant continues." I pointed at myself. "I left early." "Yes, that is the problem. Seems like his problem. 0. She said my name like she had known me for years and was already exhausted. I liked her immediately. Below us, a bell rang from the city gate. The guards on the road all stopped at once, not in panic, in order. A blue line passed over the street, sweeping from the palace district to the lower market. People stepped aside by rank, nobles first, licensed merchants second, uniformed officials third, commoners after that. At the very edge of the street, a little boy holding a basket of bread tried to cross. A small gray window appeared above him. "Contribution priority, low, please wait." The boy froze with one foot in the street. His mother stood on the other side, clutching a bundle of laundry. Her face tightened, but she did not move to help him. A noble carriage rolled slowly past the boy, so close the wheel nearly brushed his toes. The boy could see it coming. He could not step back. My smile faded. "What is that?" Leora's expression changed. The fear from the palace was still there, but underneath it was something older, something tired. "Street priority," she said quietly. "High contribution citizens move first in controlled zones." Controlled zones. Main roads, gates, guild halls, courts, temples, schools, anywhere the round law manages traffic. "Traffic," I repeated. The carriage passed. The gray window above the boy flickered. "Please wait." Another noble crossed, then a merchant wagon, then 2 guards. The boy remained frozen with 1 foot forward, basket shaking in his hands. Leora lowered her voice. "Low-rank people get shorter action windows, longer delays, fewer accepted requests. If 2 people try to act at the same time, the higher contribution value resolves first." I looked at the boy. He could not have been older than 8. What did he do? Nothing. He was born with weak mana. The words were simple. That made them worse. The boy's mother finally got a turn window. She hurried into the street, grabbed him, and pulled him back just as the next carriage line opened. The boy stumbled into her arms and started crying, but even that came out in small, broken bursts. Like the world was deciding how much fear he was allowed to express at once. I looked at the palace behind me, at the guards, roads, and floating prompts. So when Caldra said he would seal your action rights, Leora looked away. It means I would still be alive. I could eat if someone gave me food, sleep if someone ordered me to rest, heal if I was commanded. But you could not choose. She did not answer. She did not need to. For the first time since I had arrived, the world stopped feeling like a broken game. It felt like a cage with menus. A shout rose from the market below. "Make way for Lord Branth!" The crowd shifted instantly. Some people moved fast. Others froze before they could clear the path. A heavy man in purple noble robes strode through the lower square with 6 guards behind him. Gold chains hung around his neck. A polished cane tapped against the street. His hair was curled, powdered, and shaped like it had never experienced weather. A title box appeared above him. Lord Branth, District Contribution Officer. Of course. No fantasy world was complete without a tax collector who looked like he charged people for breathing too loudly. Behind him, 2 guards dragged a thin old man forward by the arms. The old man clutched a wooden box against his chest. Lord Branth lifted his cane and tapped the box. "Late again," he said. His dialogue box appeared large and gold. Lord Branth, late again. The old man trembled. "My lord, the road priority held me at the south crossing. I tried to deliver on time, but my turn windows were delayed." Branth sighed like the old man's poverty was personally inconvenient. "Excuses do not reduce tax." A red prompt opened above the old man's box. "Seize goods, confirm, and cancel." The old man's eyes widened. "Please, that is medicine for my wife." People around the square lowered their heads. No one stepped forward. I started down the stairs. Leora grabbed my sleeve. "Wait." I stopped and looked at her hand. She realized she had touched me and pulled back quickly. "Sorry, and Lord Branth is not a normal collector. His family manages priority permits for the lower city. If you humiliate him, every guard in this district will be ordered to hunt you." That was probably going to happen anyway. "Zero, listen to me. You escaped the palace because no one understood you. But if you keep causing public incidents, they will design rules around you." "Good," and she blinked. I looked back at the square. "Then I will design better problems." Below, Branth pressed confirm. The old man's wooden box was ripped from his hands. The crowd flinched, but the system had already accepted the seizure. Branth opened the box, glanced at the small medicine bottles inside, and smiled. "Unlicensed remedies, additional penalty." The old man dropped to his knees. A few coins spilled from his pocket and rolled across the stones. Branth's guards moved to collect them. That was when I noticed something beautiful. Every guard had a coin pouch. Every clerk had a coin pouch. Lord Branth had 3, one on his belt, one tucked under his robe, one hanging from a decorative chain beside a golden seal. And all of them were loose, very loose. I looked at the frozen shopkeeper above us, then at the tax collector below, then at Leora. She saw my expression and immediately went pale. "No, I did not say anything." "You made the same face you made before the prince fell." "That is impossible. I have many faces." "0. Lord Branth raised his cane toward the kneeling old man. A new prompt opened. Public penalty. Deduct contribution value, confirm, cancel. The crowd went still. Leora whispered, "If he loses more contribution value, his action windows will get even shorter." I watched the old man shaking on the ground. The boy from earlier clung to his mother's skirt. Branth smiled like the entire street existed to wait for him. I stepped off the stair. The world slowed, the cane hung in the air. The guards froze mid-breath, the coins glittered on every belt. I smiled. "Loose change," I said, walking toward the square, "is a serious security risk." The public penalty prompt hung above Lord Branth's cane. Public penalty, deduct contribution value, confirm, cancel. Everyone in the square waited. The old medicine seller knelt on the stones, both hands trembling where the guards had pulled the wooden box from his arms. His wife's medicine sat inside that box, now stamped with a red seizure mark like it had always belonged to the district office. The little boy from the street crossing clung to his mother's skirt. The mother kept her head down. Leora stood behind me at the foot of the palace stairs, one hand half raised like she wanted to stop me, but already knew she was too late. Lord Branth smiled and lowered one thick finger toward confirm. That was my turn, or more accurately, it was not anyone's turn. Which made it mine. The square stopped moving. Brant's finger hovered a breath above the prompt. His guards froze in perfect official poses. The crowd became a field of statues. One pigeon hung in the air above a fountain with its wings spread wide, which felt unnecessary. But apparently even birds had better rhythm than this government. I walked down into the square. First, I picked up the old man's wooden medicine box. The seizure mark glowed red across the lid. I moved it back into the old man's arms and carefully closed his fingers around it. "Hold this," I said, even though he could not hear me yet. Then I turned to the guards. Their coin pouches were even worse up close. Loose knots and heavy bags, official seals hanging from the sides like decorations. If this world punished people for moving before permission, it clearly had never needed to invent pickpocketing prevention. I untied the first pouch and weighed it in my hand, very heavy. I opened Lord Brant's outer robe and dropped the pouch inside. Then another, and then another. By the fifth guard, Brant's robe was sagging to one side. By the eighth, he looked like he was smuggling a small treasure chest under his stomach. I almost stopped there, then I noticed the golden chain pouch at his belt. It was marked with a contribution seal, District Office Emergency Fund. I looked at the pouch. Then at Brant's smug frozen face. "No way you are using that responsibly." I tucked it under his arm. After that, I moved the district record tablet from the clerk's hands into Brant's own sleeve. I turned the clerk's stamp upside down. I placed 3 confiscation slips inside Brant's collar. Finally, I took one tiny copper coin, balanced it on top of his powdered hair, and stepped back to admire the work. It needed one final touch. The old man's spilled coins still lay on the ground. I picked them up and placed them back in his pocket. Then I returned to the stair and stood beside Leora. Time resumed. Brant pressed confirm. The prompt flashed red, penalty action resolving, but the cane did not point at the old man anymore, because during my little walk, I had turned Brant's wrist 2 inches to the left. The confirmation beam swept across Brant himself. A golden seal on his belt lit up. Contribution audit triggered. Lord Brant blinked. "What?" The district tablet inside his sleeve chimed. Unreported funds detected. One guard's coin pouch slipped from inside Brant's robe and hit the stones. Then another and then another. Coins poured out from under his clothes in a glittering waterfall. The square went silent. For one perfect second, everyone watched the district contribution officer leak stolen money like a broken fountain. The old medicine seller stared at the medicine box in his hands. His mouth opened, no sound came out. Leora covered her lips. I could not tell whether she was horrified or trying not to laugh, probably both. Brant looked down at the mountain of coins around his boots. His face turned pale. "These are not mine." A dialogue box appeared above him. "Lord Brant, these are not mine." The contribution seal pulsed again. False statement detected. Additional audit triggered. That was when the first person in the crowd made a sound. It was not a full laugh. More like someone had tried to swallow a laugh and failed halfway. Then another commoner coughed into his sleeve. A woman turned away, shoulders shaking. The little boy from earlier stared at Brant with the open awe of a child seeing natural justice for the first time. Brant spun toward his guards. "Arrest them." His guards moved. At least they tried. Each one reached for a weapon, only to realize his belt felt strangely light. I had left their swords in a neat pile beside the fountain. The system windows above them blinked one after another. Weapon unavailable and command delayed. Item not found. I pointed at the pile. Looking for those, the guards looked at the swords. Then at me and each other. The crowd's hidden laughter spread like cracks through glass. Brant jabbed his cane toward me. You did this." "Me?" I said. "I have 0 contribution value. I am basically furniture." Leora made a small choking sound beside me. Brant's audit seal chimed again. "Unauthorized possession of District Emergency Fund. Temporary priority suspension recommended." Brant froze, not because I had moved. Because the system did it to him. A gray box appeared above his head. Contribution priority suspended. "Please wait." The man who had just made half a street wait for permission to cross now stood locked in place with his mouth open and coins around his feet. The square understood the joke at the exact same time. This time the laughter broke free. It started quietly, then spread through the crowd in waves. People covered their mouths, some bent over baskets. One old woman laughed so hard she had to hold onto a fruit stand. Even the medicine seller gave one shaky, disbelieving chuckle while clutching his box to his chest. Leora looked at the people laughing, then at Brant and me. "You are going to get us hunted by every official in the district." "Probably." "Why are you smiling?" "Because he is still waiting." Brant's eyes twitched with fury, but his body could not move until the audit finished. "Please wait." The words glowed above him. Beautiful. Unfortunately, official humiliation was louder than palace alarms. A horn sounded from the upper road. The crowd's laughter died instantly. Royal soldiers in blue and silver armor marched into the square carrying fresh wanted notices. At their head was a captain with a square jaw and the tired expression of a man whose day had been ruined. By paperwork, he held up a poster. By order of the crown, detain the failed summon known as Zero. A sketch of my face appeared on the paper. It was terrible. They had made my jaw too wide and my hair look like a frightened broom. I frowned. That is insulting. The captain's eyes found me. There, the soldiers drew their weapons. A new set of red lines snapped toward my body. Leora grabbed my sleeve again. Zero, I see them. No, you do not. Look at their badges. I looked. Each soldier wore a small silver plate shaped like a clock hand. Leora whispered, District Pursuit badges. They reduce delay when chasing marked criminals. The captain raised his sword. Pursuit order, capture the white blur. I paused. The what? Behind us, someone in the crowd whispered, white blur. Another voice echoed it from near the fountain. That is him, the white blur. I looked over my shoulder. People were still scared, but under the fear, I saw something else. Recognition, not worship, and not trust. Just the first little spark of people realizing that a noble could be made to wait too. The captain's command resolved. His soldiers lunged. They were faster than the palace guards, not fast enough. I stepped between the targeting lines and moved to the notice board beside the square. The board already had 3 copies of my wanted poster pinned to it. I removed one, took the official ink brush from a frozen clerk's hand, and added several improvements. First, I crossed out failed summon, then I wrote customer complaint specialist. Then I added a tiny crown on the sketch, then I corrected the hair. I was halfway through fixing the jaw when Leora hissed from behind me, this is not the time for art. The world resumed. The captain's squad rushed past the spot where I had been standing and crashed into Branth's frozen guards. A clean pile, not as good as the palace pile, but respectable. The notice board updated with a magical flash. Wanted the white blur, description no mana and no class, possibly armed with terrible manners. I stared at the final line. That last part was not mine. Leora grabbed the back of my jacket and pulled. We need to move. For someone who had been terrified a few minutes ago, she was getting surprisingly comfortable dragging me around. We slipped into a side street as the district square erupted into confusion behind us. Soldiers shouted. Branth continued waiting. Commoners pretended they had not laughed. The old medicine seller disappeared into the crowd with his box safely in his arms. At the next corner, the frozen shopkeeper from earlier was still smiling. Welcome, traveler. What would you like to? I stopped in front of him. Leora looked at me. No, I should finish the conversation. You should absolutely not finish the conversation. What if he has useful items? What if he has been locked in greeting mode for 10 minutes because you are impossible? I considered that, then I tapped the glowing dialogue box. The shopkeeper's sentence continued instantly. By today, I looked at him, he looked at me, his smile remained perfect. But his eyes watered slightly like some part of him had experienced the longest customer service shift in history. I gave him 1 copper coin from the ground. 1 apple, the shopkeeper moved with mechanical cheer. Transaction complete. Item acquired, apple. I took the apple. C, fixed him. Leora stared at the shopkeeper, who had resumed normal breathing and was now staring into space with the quiet horror of a man who had seen beyond. The menu, we are going to the academy, she said. Are we? Yes, the academy has classification tools, dual shields, and enough witnesses that the crown cannot simply erase you in an alley. That sounds like a place full of annoying students. It is. Great, I will fit in. We moved through 3 more streets before the pursuit caught up again. This time, the soldiers did not rush straight at me. They spread out, not smart enough to stop me, but smart enough to be annoying. Silver pursuit badges glowed on their chests. The captain pointed toward the academy district gate. Box him in. Do not attack until the command net closes. A faint grid formed across the street. Leora's face tightened. They are adapting already. She had warned me about that. If I kept causing incidents, they would design rules around me. The grid was not complete yet. I could leave if I wanted. But beyond the soldiers, beyond the gate, rose the academy towers. Tall, white, covered in banners with an enormous floating scoreboard above the entrance. Class rankings, mana rankings, and contribution rankings. A whole building dedicated to measuring people. I looked at the grid, then at the academy and Leora. Do they have more of those screens inside? Too many. Do they break easily? She sighed. With you, probably. I raised both hands. The soldiers froze for half a second, confused. Leora stared at me. What are you doing? Getting captured. Why? I smiled at the academy gate. Because if this world wants to rank me, I want a bigger scoreboard when it fails. The command net closed around me. For the first time since leaving the palace, I did not step away. The soldiers thought they had won. The academy bell rang overhead. And the massive ranking board above the gate flickered once, like it already regretted what was coming. The academy gate opened like it was doing me a favor. Two silver doors slid apart, revealing a courtyard large enough to park a small army inside. Tall white towers surrounded it on every side. Blue banners hung from the windows. Crystal screens floated above the walls, cycling through names, ranks, classes, and mana scores. The biggest board sat directly over the entrance. First-year class rankings. Rank 1, Serafina Veyer, Wind Duelist. Mana output 9,400. Rank 2, Darius Valen, Flame Knight, mana output 8,870. Rank 3, Myril Orda, Barrier Adept, mana output 8,110. The list kept going. Every name had a class, every class had a number. Every number looked like it was supposed to decide how much the person was worth. Then the guards pushed me forward, or tried to. Their command net glowed around my wrists, but it did not actually stop me from moving. It only made the guards feel better. I could have walked out at any time, but I had come here for the scoreboard. So I played along. Leora walked beside me, tense and quiet. Every student in the courtyard turned to stare at us. I understood why. I was wearing black streetwear in a sea of uniforms, armor, and mage robes. My white hair probably did not help. Neither did the wanted notices floating over the entrance with my face on them. The white blur, no class, no mana, possible public hazard. One student read the notice and laughed. That is him. Another leaned over the railing of a training platform. He is the failed summon from the palace. A third looked me up and down. He does not even have academy boots. I glanced at my sneakers. They are comfortable. No one cared. A tall instructor in a navy coat stepped into the courtyard. His glasses had a thin silver chain, and his expression suggested he had been born disappointed in students. Silence, the word snapped through the courtyard. A dialogue box appeared. Academy examiner, silence. Every student quieted at once. The examiner looked at the guards. By royal order, the anomalous summon known as Zero will undergo immediate classification. The guards released the command net. It dissolved into blue squares around my hands. The examiner raised a crystal slate. A circular platform rose from the center of the courtyard. Step onto the evaluation plate. I looked at Leora. Is this going to hurt? It should not. That is not comforting. It is the best answer I have. Fair enough. I stepped onto the plate. Blue light climbed from the floor, scanned my shoes, my hands, my face, then the space above my head. A massive status window opened for the entire courtyard to see. Name 0, origin unknown, and class none. Mana output 0, blessing none. Contribution value 0. Combat role invalid. For half a second, nobody spoke. Then the courtyard exploded. Students laughed from the balconies. A group of noble boys slapped each other on the shoulders like they had just heard the funniest joke in academy history. One girl covered her mouth and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. Combat role invalid. Even training dolls have a role. Another student pointed at me. Maybe the academy can use him to test fall damage. Leora's hands curled into fists at her sides. I looked up at the ranking board. My name appeared at the bottom, then disappeared and appeared again. Rank 0, then the number flickered. Rank unlisted, then again. Rank please contact administrator. I smiled. That one feels accurate. The examiner did not smile. He tapped his slate. Run secondary scan. The evaluation plate brightened. A second window opened. Searching for hidden class root, none found. Searching for dormant mana vein, none found. Searching for curse suppression, none found. Searching for stealth blessing, none found. Searching for spatial magic trace, none found. The laughter grew weaker with every line. By the time the final result appeared, the courtyard was quiet again. No registered power source detected. The examiner frowned. Impossible, I sighed. People keep using that word like it is going to start working. A voice called from the training ring to my left. Then test him properly. The crowd parted. A broad-shouldered student stepped forward with red hair tied behind his neck and a flame-shaped crest on his chest. His uniform looked expensive enough to have its own inheritance rights. The ranking board flashed beside his name. Darius Valen, Flame Knight, and rank 2. Darius rolled his shoulders and smiled at me. If he has no power, one basic exchange will prove it. The examiner hesitated, then a new window opened above the courtyard. Evaluation match authorized. Battle stage loading, the world shifted. The marble courtyard blurred. The students' towers and banners flattened for a heartbeat, becoming simpler, sharper, stranger. When the image settled, I found myself standing on a square battlefield made of tiled blue stone. The students along the balconies looked smaller now, like pixel characters drawn from a bird's-eye angle. Darius stood across from me, his armor simplified into clean red shapes. Even I had become a smaller version of myself, a white-haired figure in dark clothes standing on a grid. I looked down at my blocky little hands. Oh, this is adorable. A command window opened in front of Darius. Darius's turn. Attack, skill, defend, and item. His portrait glowed on the turn order bar. Mine did not appear at all, still not on the list. When Darius selected skill, flame line. A red targeting strip stretched from his sword to the tile where I stood. The students cheered, "Burn him out, let us see him blur now." Darius grinned. "Do not worry, failed summon. The academy healers can probably fix minor burns." Leora shouted from the side, "Zero move." I already had. The world froze the instant Darius confirmed the skill. The flame effect hung on his blade, half-formed. The targeting strip glowed bright red. The students' mouths were open in mid-cheer. I walked across the grid. The pixel style made everything even funnier. Each step clicked softly on the tile like I was moving a chess piece by hand. I reached Darius, grabbed him by both shoulders, and turned him 45 degrees to the left. Then I noticed a row of target dummies along the side of the arena. One of them had a smug, painted face. Perfect. I turned Darius a little more, then I returned to my tile. The world resumed. Darius swung. The flame line blasted across the arena, completely missing me and striking the painted dummy dead center. Wooden target exploded into glowing damage numbers. Critical hit. Training dummy defeated. The courtyard went silent. Darius stared at the smoking dummy, then at me, then back at the dummy. I missed. I pointed at the target. Strong opening. The dummy never saw it coming. A few students laughed before they could stop themselves. Darius's face darkened. The examiner tapped his slate with sharper movements. Next test, barrier interaction. The girl who had mocked me earlier stepped forward. Myral Orda, barrier adept and rank 3. She lifted one hand and a translucent shield sigil appeared in front of her. "Tricks against targeting will not work on a fixed barrier," she said. "A barrier forms around the caster before an attack can reach them." A command window appeared. Myral's turn. Skill selected, Noble Aegis. A blue hexagonal shield began forming around her. Again, the world paused at the confirmation frame. I walked over and studied the barrier. It was not complete yet. The edges were still drawing themselves into place, like the spell was waiting for the animation to finish before becoming real. In the center of the forming barrier floated a small crystal focus. That looked important. I reached in. My hand passed through the unfinished wall without resistance. I plucked the crystal focus out of the spell and carried it back with me. The world resumed. Myral spread her hand dramatically. Noble Aegis. The barrier flashed, then collapsed into a sad little puff of blue light. A system window appeared. Skill failed. Core focus unavailable. Myral looked down at her empty palm. I held up the crystal. "Are you looking for this?" This time the laughter came faster, not from everyone. Some students were still too shocked, but enough. The sound rippled across the courtyard, and Myral's face turned bright pink. The examiner stared at the focus in my hand. "How did you remove a spell core before formation?" I asked politely. "No, you did not." "That might be why it worked." He rubbed his forehead. The ranking board above us flickered again. 0. Rank 0, rank undefined, and rank error. Then the letters stretched across the screen. Error class. The entire courtyard went quiet. That label felt different. Failed summon was an insult. White blur was a rumor. Error class sounded like the world had finally admitted I was its problem. The examiner turned toward the upper balcony. "Run a hidden mana sweep." 3 teachers lifted crystal rods. Blue rings passed over the arena, over my body, over the tiles, over the space I had crossed. Result, no mana trace. Second sweep, no movement spell detected. Third sweep, no registered class activity. The teachers looked at one another. Darius looked less angry now and more uncertain. Myral held her hand close to her chest, as if I might steal the concept of barriers next. Leora looked worried but not surprised. She had seen enough already. And then I felt someone else watching me, not laughing, not panicking, and watching. On the far side of the courtyard, a girl in a white and blue uniform leaned against the railing with her arms crossed. Silver hair fell over one shoulder. A thin ribbon of wind circled her wrist, moving even while the rest of the courtyard seemed still. Her eyes were not on my face. They were on the air between where I had been standing and where I had moved, like she was tracing a path no one else could see. The ranking board above the courtyard shifted. Rank 1, Seraphina Veyer and Wind Duelist. Mana output, 9,400. For the first time since arriving at the academy, someone did not look at me like trash. She looked at me like a problem worth solving. I smiled up at her. She did not smile back. A faint green line of wind moved across the arena floor, following the route I had taken to reach Darius. Then the route I had taken to reach Myral. Then the route I had taken back to my starting tile. Seraphina's eyes narrowed. "That is not teleportation," she said softly. The examiner heard her, so did I. The courtyard stayed silent. The scoreboard flickered one more time above my head. 0 class error status under review. I looked at the words, then at Seraphina, then at the ruined training dummy still smoking from Darius's heroic victory. "Under review," I said. "Fine, try not to take too long." Seraphina lifted one hand. The wind around her wrist sharpened into a thin needle. And for the first time, I wondered if someone in this world might actually be able to hit me. The wind needle turned above Seraphina's palm. It was thin enough to look harmless. That made it worse. Every other student had stared at where I appeared. Serafina stared at the space I crossed. Before she could throw it, the academy examiner lifted his slate. The evaluation is not finished. Serafina's fingers closed. The needle dissolved into green light. She did not look happy about waiting, but at least she understood the concept better than I did. The examiner glanced across the courtyard. Final interaction test. Summoner Oren, step forward. A tall student in a green coat entered the tactical arena. A silver chain hung from his wrist, connected to a beast crest shaped like a cat's eye. Oren gave me the kind of smile people used when they had already imagined the applause after winning. Moving a caster is one thing, he said. A bonded beast follows intent. It does not wait for you to touch the summoner. A dialogue box appeared beside him. Oren, a bonded beast follows intent. I looked at the box. Does it follow snacks? His smile slipped. Oren raised the crest. A circle of green light opened beside him, and a creature the size of a horse stepped onto the grid. It had dark blue fur, 2 curved horns, and paws wrapped in small bands of lightning. Storm Lynx, class rare summon, bond loyalty 82. Oren crossed his arms. My Storm Lynx has been trained since birth. It will not be distracted by childish tricks. A menu opened in front of him. Command Beast, attack, guard, pursue, and reward. The final option interested me. Oren selected attack. The lynx lowered its body. A red path appeared from its paws to my tile. Then the action paused for confirmation. I walked over to Oren's command window. The 4 options hung in the air like cards. I tried touching reward. Nothing happened. So I took Oren's frozen hand and moved one finger from attack to reward. Smaller prompt opened. Choose reward item. A row of icons appeared on his belt. Dried thunder meat, moonfish strip, training biscuit. I selected the fish. The Storm Lynx's red targeting path vanished. A bright yellow line connected it to Oren's pouch instead. I removed the moonfish strip, returned to my tile, and held it behind my back. The world resumed. Oren threw his hand forward. Destroy him. The lynx launched itself across the arena. Students shouted. Leora covered her mouth. The beast reached me in one blur of blue fur and electricity. Then it stopped. Its nose twitched. I held up the fish. The storm lynx sat. Oren's face emptied. Attack. The beast lifted one paw. I gave it the fish. It ate the strip, rubbed its head against my shoulder, and produced a rumbling sound that shook the grid tiles. A system window appeared. Command conflict. Reward accepted. Current loyalty target temporarily reassigned. The courtyard erupted. Students laughed from the balconies. Darius laughed loudest, probably because someone else had replaced him as the academy's newest disaster. Myril tried to hide a smile behind one hand. Oren stared at his beast. You betrayed me for one fish. The storm lynx licked my sleeve. I scratched behind its horn. Technically, the menu approved it. The examiner rubbed both temples. Returned the summon. Oren recalled the lynx with the wounded dignity of a man losing an argument to his own pet. Then Serafina stepped down from the balcony. The tactical stage redrew itself around her. Unlike the others, she did not make a speech about bloodlines, talent, or how badly I was about to lose. She stopped 10 tiles away and looked at the tier in space where my path had been traced by her wind. You are not teleporting, she said. The courtyard quieted. The examiner frowned. Explain. Serafina lifted one hand. Several ribbons of green light appeared across the battlefield. They floated at different heights, thin as threads, stretching from pillar to pillar. Teleportation removes the distance between 2 positions. There would be no pressure wave between them, no displaced dust, no change in air temperature. One thread bent along the path I had taken to steal Myril's spell core. Another curved toward the training dummy Darius had destroyed. Serafina looked at me. He crosses the distance. He simply does it before the round law finishes processing the active action. That was the first explanation I had heard that described what it felt like. I did not disappear and ran. Everyone else was forced to wait. The difference had not mattered against the prince or the guards. Looking at the wind threads, I realized it could matter now. Serafina raised 2 fingers. Move. A small battle prompt appeared between us. Prediction exercise. First successful touch wins. I looked at the examiner. She gets to throw needles at me during an evaluation. They are compressed wind, he said. Non-lethal. That word is doing a lot of work. Serafina flicked her wrist. The first needle hovered beside her shoulder. Her turn bar glowed. The moment the command locked, the courtyard froze. I moved right. The wind threads bent around my shoulders and knees. The needle did not aim at where I had been. Its targeting line shifted toward where the threads predicted I would pass. I changed direction. The line changed too. For the first time, a weapon followed me inside the gap. I dropped low and twisted. The needle flashed past my cheek. The world resumed. A thin cut opened across the sleeve of my jacket, not skin and just cloth. Still, I stared at it. The entire courtyard went silent. Serafina had missed me by less than an inch. The examiner raised one hand, but Serafina did not lower hers. One more route, she said. Fourth needle formed, then divided into 3 smaller points. The wind threads tightened until the air between us looked like a green web. Leora stepped toward the arena boundary. His sleeve is cut. The exercise already proved your point. Serafina glanced at her. A sleeve is not an injury, and he still thinks the pauses belong only to him. She was right about that. Until then, I had treated the frozen moments like a private hallway. Everyone else stood outside. I walked through, simple. But Serafina's wind had been placed before the hallway opened. It did not need permission to exist inside it. The 3 needles spread across likely exits. I considered the obvious routes, then looked at the floor. Dust had collected between 2 grid tiles. I dragged one shoe through it, kicked the dust toward the left threads, and moved right. The drifting cloud bent the lattice before my shoulder did. 2 needles followed the false pressure change. The third corrected toward me. I stopped behind the floating status panel instead of completing the route. The needle pierced the place my chest would have crossed. Then the world resumed. The panel flickered from the impact. Error class temporarily obscured. A few students laughed nervously. Serafina did not. You used debris to falsify the trail. I used dirt. Debris sounds expensive. She released the remaining wind. The exercise had changed something in the courtyard. Darius and Myral were no longer looking at me like an unarmed joke. The teachers were no longer searching only for hidden mana. They were measuring distances, surfaces, and persistent spells. The world had begun learning the wrong lesson in the right direction, and I had learned the part that mattered. If something existed continuously, it could reach into my gap. She lowered her hand. Again, no smug smile, no cheering. She was testing a theory. So was I. The next prompt appeared. I moved left in a straight burst. 3 threads bent. The second needle arrived ahead of me. I stopped before it crossed my path. The pressure of its passage lifted my hair. There it was. The thing I had been ignoring. My body still crossed space. My feet still touched the ground. My shoulders still pushed air aside. I was not stopping time. I was moving through moments everyone else was forbidden to use. Serafina could not move freely inside those moments, but her magic could prepare for them. Again, she said. This time I did not run in a straight line. I took 2 steps right, 1 back, stopped, changed my height, then burst diagonally. The threads bent in 6 directions. Serafina's targeting line split, recalculated, and snapped toward the wrong route. The needle passed behind me. I continued forward. She prepared another. I stopped halfway. Her line overshot. I moved again. By the time the action frame resolved, I was standing beside her. I could have stolen her crest. I could have turned her around. I could have tied her boots, though that joke belonged to Caldress. Instead, I tapped one finger against the wind needle floating above her hand. It spun harmlessly into the sky. System window flashed. Prediction exercise complete. Successful touch, 0. Serafina looked sideways at me. You changed your rhythm. You nearly ruined my jacket. So you adapted. I am emotionally attached to this jacket. For the first time, one corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Close enough. The academy examiner dismissed the tactical arena. The courtyard returned to full detail, and the students began speaking all at once. Some called me a speed class fraud. Others insisted I had hidden space magic. The scoreboard answered none of them. 0. Class error in status unresolved. A slow clap came from the upper platform. An older man in a black academic coat stood beside Archmage Velmorin. Gold lines ran down his sleeves, and a chain of class crests hung from one shoulder. Headmaster Orlin, he looked at the ruined dummy, Myral's stolen focus, Orin's offended lynx crest, and the cut in my sleeve. The academy cannot classify him, Orlin said, so we will test whether the world can. Velmorin opened the round index beside him. My name was still absent. A controlled dungeon trial, he said. Dungeons assign parties, rewards, movement tiles, and combat priority directly through the round law. If he remains unregistered there, we will know the anomaly is not local to the palace or academy. Leora stepped forward. He was summoned today. Orlin looked at her contribution crest before he looked at her face. Then he has learned quickly. I looked up at the dungeon permit forming above the platform. Dungeon trial authorized. Party assessment required. Reward eligibility pending. Do dungeons have treasure? I asked. Serafina folded her arms. Usually, then I support science. Before anyone could respond, the ranking board flickered red. A royal projection opened above the courtyard. Caldress appeared in formal armor, his expression carefully controlled and his boots safely hidden below the frame. Let the failed summon enter the dungeon, he announced. If he survives, he will prove his tricks publicly in the Royal Academy tournament. The students murmured. Caldress looked straight at me through the projection. There will be nowhere to run. I took a bite from the apple I had bought from the frozen shopkeeper. You said that in the palace too. The projection froze for half a second. Caldress's eye twitched. The tournament notice appeared beneath him. Royal Academy Tournament. Special participant, error class 0. I looked at the dungeon permit, then the tournament notice, then at Serafina, who was still studying the cut in my sleeve. This world had finally produced someone who could almost see me. And apparently, it wanted to put us both in a dungeon before giving the prince another chance to embarrass himself. I could work with that. The dungeon entrance looked like a stone mouth trying not to laugh. 2 days after the academy evaluation, we stood beneath an archway carved into the side of a mountain outside the capital. Blue fire burned in iron bowls. A giant crystal door blocked the passage beyond. Above it floated a party screen. Dungeon, Clockwork Catacombs. Recommended class rank, C. Maximum party size, 5. Movement mode, tactical. Turn priority, enforced. Reward distribution, contribution based. That final line made Leora stop walking. The party slots opened beneath it. Slot 1, Serafina Veyer. Slot 2, Darius Valen. Slot 3, Myral Orda. Slot 4, 0, unrecognized. Slot 5, empty. Leora's name hovered beneath the screen in gray. Candidate rejected. Contribution value below recommended threshold. Darius glanced at the message and shrugged. The dungeon is correcting the party. A low-rank healer would only reduce the reward split. Leora's face did not change. That was what bothered me. She had heard versions of that sentence so often she no longer expected anyone to challenge it. The dungeon warden stood beside the crystal door. He was a narrow man named Master Kellen, wearing a coat covered in key-shaped badges. The system has selected the highest value available party, he said. The healer may observe from the external monitor. I looked at the 5 glowing slots, then at the gray marker bearing Leora's name. A confirmation prompt opened. Accept party formation, yes, no. Everyone froze while Serafina, the registered party leader, moved one hand toward yes. I walked up to the screen. The portraits were not flat images. They were small crystal plaques resting in glowing grooves. I lifted Darius's plaque from slot 2. He remained frozen with his arms crossed. Nothing personal, I told him. You are just standing closest to the return tray. I placed his plaque in the gray candidate row and moved Leora's plaque into slot 2. Then I put Darius in the empty 5th slot. The screen updated. Slot 1, Serafina Veyer. Slot 2, Leora, support healer. Slot 3, Myral Orda. Slot 4, 0, unrecognized. Slot 5, Darius Valen. Party formation valid. I returned to my position. Serafina pressed yes. The crystal door opened. Darius looked up at the party screen. Then at Leora and me. How did she get slot 2? I pointed at the dungeon. Seniority. She has survived me longer than any of you. Kellen checked his key slate twice. The formation was accepted. Once the dungeon confirms entry, changes are locked. Leora looked at her glowing party mark as if it might vanish if she breathed too hard. Serafina noticed. She said nothing, but she moved aside so Leora could enter beside her instead of behind everyone. The clockwork catacombs swallowed us in blue light. The world changed again. Stone corridors flattened into a tactical map. Walls rose only 2 people high from my point of view, like an old role-playing game seen from slightly behind my shoulder. Each floor tile had faint arrows along its edges. Our party portraits appeared on the left side of my vision. Serafina, Leora, and Myral. 0, error, Darius. Across the corridor, 4 small metal creatures waited on square patrol tiles. They looked like wolves assembled from armor scraps and clock hands. Clockhound, movement range, 4 tiles. Aggro trigger, line of sight. Kellen's voice came through the observation crystal. Each registered unit may move a limited number of tiles during its turn. Attacks require range and line of sight. Destroying monsters grants contribution and advances the route. A path of blue tiles lit beneath Serafina. Her turn. She moved 4 squares forward, then her body locked at the edge of the path. Darius moved next. Myral followed. Leora received only 2 movement tiles. The system had not merely ranked her lower, it gave her less space. Then the turn order reached my portrait. 0, error, calculating movement allowance, calculation failed, proceeding to next registered unit. The hound's turn bars lit. They stared at Serafina and Darius. None of them looked at me. I walked down the corridor. No blue path appeared under my feet. No tile count decreased. The first hound remained frozen with one metal paw raised. I crouched beside it and waved a hand in front of its glowing eyes. Nothing. I stepped behind it. Its head did not turn. A red cone projected from its face, marking line of sight. From behind, I was outside the cone. So the monsters are board pieces too, I said. Kellen's voice sharpened through the crystal. Return to your position. The enemy phase is active. I noticed. At the far end of the corridor, a treasure chest sat behind the hounds. Gold symbol floated above it, optional loot. I walked between the frozen monsters and opened the lid. A prompt appeared. Open chest during active encounter. Warning, combat has not resolved. I selected yes, the chest clicked. Inside lay 3 silver coins, a coil of blue wire, and a small bronze key. I picked up the key. Item acquired, root key, encounter warning repeated. I took the wire too. Kellen's voice rose. The chest is outside your legal movement range. I do not have one. That is not permission. It is not a prohibition either. The enemy phase resumed. The first hound lunged towards Seraphina. Before its attack resolved, I turned its body toward the second hound. I rotated the second toward the third. Then I moved their metal tails into one another's targeting cones and returned to the party. The hounds attacked. Metal jaws snapped onto metal armor. One clockwork wolf tackled another. The third fired a bolt into the fourth side. Damage numbers filled the corridor. Friendly target struck. Formation disrupted. Aggro route invalid. Darius stared at the mechanical pile. That should not count. The dungeon disagreed. Encounter complete. Contribution awarded. 0. Calculation pending. Leora received a small amount of contribution despite never taking a turn. Her party mark brightened. Darius noticed that too. She did nothing. She joined the party, I said. Apparently being present has value. Revolutionary idea. The next corridor proved why the dungeon had accepted Leora, even if the academy had not wanted her. A line of harmless-looking gray tiles crossed the floor. Darius stepped toward them while the system prepared his movement route. Leora's party crest flashed. Support insight triggered. Hidden status tile detected. Delay Meyer. Effect, reduce next movement allowance by 75%. She pointed immediately. Do not step on the third row. Darius stopped at the edge of his legal path. I can see the floor. The status is concealed from attack classes. He looked ready to ignore her, so I walked onto the tile myself during the pause. Gray light climbed my shoe. Movement reduction attempting to apply. No registered movement allowance found. Effect failed. I stepped off and moved a broken shield onto the tile instead. The trap discharged into the metal with a wet sucking sound. The route cleared. Leora's contribution number rose again. Support discovery credited. Darius stared at the safe path, then at her. He did not apologize. That would have required more character growth than one corridor could reasonably provide. But when the party moved again, he waited for Leora to point out the next hidden tile before taking his turn. She noticed. A small smile appeared, then vanished before anyone could comment on it. The next corridor narrowed into a stone bridge over a dark pit. A blue healing symbol glowed on the center tile. Darius stepped toward it. Leora caught his sleeve. Do not. He looked down at her hand like a servant had grabbed a crown. It is a recovery tile. The symbol is reversed. The warden checked his tablet. Support perception identifies status traps. A smaller window appeared only above Leora. False recovery rune. Effect, drain current health and convert it into dungeon energy. Darius pulled his arm free, embarrassed that she had stopped him in front of everyone. I saw it. You were standing on the entry arrow, Seraphina said. He decided not to answer. The bridge allowed one registered unit to move at a time. That created a problem when 3 blade constructs appeared behind us and the turn order placed Leora last. Enemy pursuit begins in 2 actions. Party crossing order, Darius, Seraphina, and Myril. 0, unresolved, Leora. I walked onto the bridge during the sorting prompt, lifted Leora's nameplate, and moved it to the first position. Crossing order modified, authority required. I took the small stone door token from the treasure chest and pressed it against the authority slot. Temporary dungeon access recognized. Modification accepted. Leora crossed first, then Myril, then Darius, who spent the entire trip pretending the order had been his idea. The blade constructs reached the bridge as I moved the false recovery rune onto their path. Their pursuit command resolved. All 3 stepped onto the glowing tile. Health drained. Dungeon energy restored. Encounter cancelled. Enemy units defeated by environment. The warden was silent for several seconds. Then his voice returned through the crystal. That token was intended to open a door. I looked at the bridge behind us. It opened possibilities. Leora smiled before she could stop herself. It was the first time I had seen her do that inside the dungeon. We moved deeper. The next chamber contained pressure plates and 2 lines of skeletal soldiers. Each skeleton waited behind a shield, their movement arrows pointing toward narrow lanes. Seraphina studied the map. They are designed to funnel us through the center. Myril raised a barrier. Darius prepared flame magic. I walked around the outer wall while the enemy command loaded. The tactical map ended at the wall. The actual floor did not. I stepped over the low boundary, followed the back of the scenery, and entered behind the skeleton formation. For a moment, the system did not know where to place me. 0 location, unknown. Searching current encounter, I turned the skeletons to face the wrong corridor and moved their shield locks together. When the turn resumed, all 6 charged away from us and became wedged in a doorway. Darius stared. You left the map. The map left space around itself. That is cheating. Kellen's voice came through the crystal. The dungeon accepted the state. And the dungeon is cheating too, Darius snapped. A larger warning opened above us. Encounter topology inconsistent. Unregistered participant position unavailable. Recalculating route. The entire dungeon shuddered. Walls slid sideways, tiles rotated. The chest corridor vanished behind stone. The stuck skeletons sank into the floor. Our party icons flickered. 0 missing, 0 present, and 0 missing. Leora looked at me. Is that bad? The dungeon is thinking. That is what worries me. The next chamber loaded with no ordinary monsters. A circular platform rose from the center. Black warning lines spread across its surface. The blue fire along the walls turned red. Kellen stopped speaking. Seraphina's hand moved toward her sword. A heavy shape assembled above the platform, 1 plate at a time. Iron legs locked into place, 4 arms unfolded. A featureless helmet turned toward us. The dungeon window changed. Route recalculation complete. Standard encounters suspended. Corrective guardian authorized. Passive skill, punish illegal movement. I looked at the warning ring around the guardian, then at the ordinary turn bar above its head. It was still a board piece, just a bigger one. I smiled. Leora saw it and whispered, please stop making that face. The guardian's eyes opened. Auto counter active. The corrective guardian did not wait for its turn. That should have warned me. It stood at the center of the circular chamber, 4 iron arms hanging at its sides. A black ring covered the floor around it. Thin red lines pointed outward in every direction. Corrective guardian. Class, sequence warden, passive skill, punish illegal movement. Counter condition, unregistered approach detected. Darius read the warning and smiled for the first time since entering the dungeon. There, the dungeon finally made something for him. I looked at the guardian. That sounds like special treatment. Seraphina stepped in front of the party. Wait, the red lines are active even outside its turn. I heard her and understood the words. I also remembered every normal monster in the dungeon standing helpless while I walked behind it. So I made the reasonable decision to test the difference personally. The Guardian's turn bar was dark. The party was still choosing commands. I moved 1 step into the black ring. The red lines snapped toward me. The Guardian's head turned. Not after the action frame, inside it. A 5th arm unfolded from its chest and struck the space I was crossing. I tried to change direction. The counter followed the pressure trail. A wall of force caught my side and threw me across the chamber. I hit the floor, slid over 3 tiles, and stopped against a pillar. For a moment, the ceiling refused to stay still. The whole room went silent. Then pain arrived. My shoulder burned. My ribs felt like they had been introduced to a carriage wheel. Nothing seemed broken, but breathing had become an activity I needed to think about. A system window floated above me. Illegal movement punished. Counter successful. Darius's smile disappeared. Myril stared at the Guardian. Seraphina stared at the red lines. Liara ran toward me the instant her support turn opened. Her movement path only gave her 2 tiles. I was 6 away. She reached the end of her blue path and stopped so suddenly her robe snapped forward. 0, her hands were already glowing. Heal target out of range. Please wait for next turn. I pushed myself upright. I am fine. My ribs disagreed. Leora's eyes narrowed. You cannot even say that convincingly. Outside the chamber, the observation gallery reacted before the party did. Through the crystal wall, academy students leaned forward. A few nobles who had spent the morning calling me untouchable suddenly looked delighted. Not because they cared whether I was hurt, because proof of weakness felt like proof that their world still made sense. Headmaster Orlin did not celebrate. Velmorin rewound the impact trace 3 times. The image showed my route entering the black ring, the passive line recognizing the pressure change, and the Guardian moving without a normal command window. It did not become faster than him, Orlin said through the observation channel. Velmorin's reply was quiet. It did not need to, it was already active where he chose to pass. That sentence reached me while Leora's healing light worked through my shoulder. I had no defense statistic, no enchanted skin, no automatic barrier waiting to save me if I misjudged a path. My advantage was enormous. My body was still mine. 1 bad route could turn all that speed into a faster way to hit something. I stored the lesson beside Seraphina's wind needle. Continuous effects, prepared space, and prediction. Those were the words that could make this world dangerous. The Guardian's active turn began. It raised 2 arms towards Seraphina and Darius. While its command loaded, I moved not toward the boss, but toward Leora. The counter lines tracked me for half a second, then stopped at the edge of the black ring. So the passive covered an area, not the entire room. I stepped into Leora's range before her next support turn. The world resumed, warm light wrapped around my shoulder and side. The sharpest pain eased. Leora's status appeared beside mine. Support action successful. Minor impact strain reduced. Her contribution value rose by 6 points. She noticed the number, then looked away from it and checked my breathing instead. That told me more about her than the number ever could. Thank you, I said. Do not do that again. I cannot promise that. Then at least look before running into the red death circle. Reasonable. The Guardian completed its attack. 2 iron blades swept across the chamber. Seraphina dodged within her legal movement path. Myral's barrier caught the second blade. Darius launched flame into the Guardian's chest, but the armor absorbed most of it. Kellen's voice returned through the observation crystal. The sequence warden is not part of the standard route. Its passive reactions are continuously authorized. Continuously, I repeated. That was the difference. Normal actions waited for turns. The counter did not. It occupied the space the entire time. Seraphina crouched near the edge of the black ring. Wind threads spread across the floor. It reacts to approach direction, she said, not presence. The counter aligns with the first pressure trail crossing the boundary. I watched the lines. A loose stone rolled down from the pillar I had hit. It crossed the black ring. The Guardian's chest arm snapped toward it and crushed the stone. Then the red lines dimmed for one breath. Counter cooldown 3 seconds. I smiled. Leora saw it. That face again. This one has science behind it. The chamber contained 8 stone pillars. 2 were already cracked from the Guardian's attacks. Loose rubble covered the outer floor. The Guardian could hit anything entering its ring. It could only counter one approach at a time. And every counter created a cooldown. I picked up 3 stones. The party turn began. Seraphina selected Wind Thread. Myral selected Barrier Link. Darius selected Flame Lance. Leora selected Heal Reserve. My portrait still showed error. I threw the first stone from the left. The Guardian countered. Its chest arm smashed down, breaking the nearest pillar base. I threw the second from the right. The counter line turned, but the passive was still cooling. No strike. I ran into the ring. The red lines detected me. The Guardian's counter rearmed. Before it could strike, I changed direction and kicked the third stone behind it. The counter followed the new pressure trail. Its chest arm drove backward into another pillar. Stone cracked. The pillar leaned over the Guardian's shoulder. Seraphina understood first. She sent a wind thread around the top of the pillar and pulled. Myral placed a barrier on the opposite side, forcing the fall inward. The pillar crashed onto the Guardian. Its upper armor split. A bright blue core appeared beneath the plates. Weak point exposed. Darius's flame lance fired. The Guardian raised 2 arms to block it. That left the counter arm protecting the core. Its cooldown window opened again. 3 seconds and I moved. This time, I did not aim for the Guardian's body. I aimed for the exposed core. Every step hit the floor hard enough to send dust behind me. The air pressed against my face. My healed ribs protested. My legs felt less like they were running and more like they were being fired from one tile to the next. The Guardian began turning, too late. I crossed the ring during the cooldown and drove one fist into the blue crystal. I had thrown punches before. This one felt different. The speed had nowhere to go except forward. A sharp pressure wave burst across the chamber. The core shattered in a flash of blue light. The Guardian froze. All 4 arms dropped. Then the iron body collapsed straight down. Sequence warden defeated. For a second no one spoke. My hand hurt. A lot. I opened and closed my fingers carefully. Leora rushed toward me again. You hit crystal with your bare hand. It seemed fragile. Your knuckles disagree. She wrapped them in healing light while the dungeon began calculating the result. Route complete. Clear time 000614. The number flashed red. Clear time rejected. Minimum legal movement time 003100. Recalculating, the chamber trembled. Our reward windows opened, closed, then opened again. Contribution distribution failed. Unregistered unit dealt final impact. Recalculating, Darius looked up at the ceiling. Can it stop saying that? The dungeon did not stop. Recalculation failed. Reward forcibly assigned. A column of dark blue light descended over me. Letters appeared one at a time. Title acquired, turnless 1. Effect, unregistered movement recognized as persistent anomaly. Warning, authority attention greatly increased. The title settled above my status screen. Name 0, class error and mana 0. Title, turnless 1. Seraphina read it twice. Velmorin's face appeared in the observation crystal. He did not look pleased. Headmaster Orlin stood behind him, equally silent. Kellen stared at his key slate. The dungeon rewarded an action it cannot legally record. That sounds generous, I said. Velmorin's eyes moved to the warning beneath the title. No, it sounds like the round law has stopped ignoring you. The dungeon exit opened. Outside, Academy officials, royal observers, and students waited around the clear time board. our names appeared. Serafina Veyer, clear. Liara, clear. Myril Orta, clear. Darius Valen, clear. 0. Invalid, clear. Accepted. Then the title appeared beneath it. Turnless 1. The reward did not end with a title. A dark token dropped from the light and landed in my palm. One side showed a broken clock, the other showed an empty space where a class crest should have been. Anomaly token. Use unknown, transfer restricted. Velmorin asked to inspect it. I closed my hand. You can look from there. It may be dangerous. So was the dungeon. You sent me into that. Headmaster Orlin coughed into one fist, suspiciously close to a laugh. Velmorin's expression did not change, but he stopped reaching for the token. Liora checked my hand one more time. Serafina watched the dark symbol rather than the bandage. The dungeon had not only failed to reject me, it had produced an item specifically because it could not explain me. That meant every larger system in this world might do the same thing. Fail and recalculate, then create a new problem trying to correct the first one. The crowd reacted in layers. Students gasped. Teachers went silent. Royal observers started writing reports. Liora looked relieved. Darius looked offended that invalid clear sounded better than his normal one. Serafina looked at the bandage around my hand. You can be hit, she said. I noticed, and your body pays for the speed. I flexed my fingers. Also noticed. Good, maybe you will stop treating every warning like decoration. Unlikely. Far from the academy, beyond the capital's white towers, a bell rang inside a circular temple. A red report opened above a silent altar. Persistent anomaly confirmed. Title assigned, Turnless 1. Divine sequence violation level increased. A man in white robes opened his eyes. A silver ring floated behind his head, divided into 12 perfect segments like a clock with no numbers. The priests around him remained bowed. The man read my name from the report. 0, he said. The round saint lifted one hand. Every candle in the temple froze mid-flame. A being outside divine sequence is not a hero. The warning report turned black. It is a violation. Prince Caldrus called it a tournament. The city called it revenge with assigned seating. 3 days after the dungeon trial, banners covered the Royal Academy arena. Nobles filled the upper balconies in enchanted coats and polished armor. Students packed the lower stands. Commoners crowded behind iron rails outside, watching through floating projection screens. At the center of it all stood Caldrus. His boots were different. No laces. Smart. He raised one hand, and the arena fell silent under a royal dialogue prompt. Today, he announced, we expose deception beneath the protection of law. A giant scoreboard lit behind him. Royal Academy Tournament. Special Examination, Error Class 0. Caldrus looked toward the entrance gate. No corridors to flee through, no unregistered treasure paths, no weak servants to hide behind. Every match will be judged by the round law. Liora stood beside me in the tunnel. He rehearsed that. Definitely, do not move his podium. I looked at the podium. I was not thinking about it. She gave me a flat look. You are thinking about it now. The gate opened. I walked into the arena wearing the same black jacket, dark pants, and sneakers I had arrived in. Every other competitor wore armor glowing with runes. The crowd noticed. A noble student near the front shouted, did Error Class forget his equipment? I checked my pockets, apple core removed, royal seal still present, 3 dungeon coins, a strip of blue wire. No, I said, I travel light. My first opponent entered in silver armor. A title appeared above him. Lucan Voss, Class, Banner Knight, Mana Output 7300. Match type, flag capture. 2 flags rose from opposite ends of the arena. Mine was black, Lucan's was silver. The rules appeared overhead. Capture the opposing flag and return it to your starting circle. Movement begins after referee confirmation. Lucan planted one hand on his sword. This match requires speed and strategy. Tricks will not save you. The referee raised both arms. Competitors ready. A dialogue box appeared. Referee, begin. The world paused between the word and the confirmation chime. I walked to Lucan's side of the arena, lifted the silver flag, carried it back, planted it in my circle. Then returned to where I had started. I considered taking his flagpole too. That felt excessive. The world resumed. Now, the system checked the field. Opposing flag captured. Return condition satisfied. Winner 0. Match duration 0:00:00:00. The scoreboard tried to display the time. It showed 0, then a question mark, then 0 again. Lucan had not moved. Sword remained half drawn. The crowd stared at the silver flag standing in my circle. One commoner outside the rails started laughing. Then half the student section joined him. Caldrus gripped the edge of his podium. Liora looked at me. At least you left the podium alone. I showed restraint. The second match loaded immediately. My next opponent marched in wearing red and gold armor and carrying a long curved sword. Kashin Ro, class Noble Blade Master. Mana output 8020. He drew the weapon slowly so the sunlight caught the edge. A sword is an extension of noble will, he said. You cannot steal technique. I looked at the sword. Do I need the technique? His turn began. Skill selected. Sevenfold royal cut. Kashin raised the blade. The attack animation paused before the first strike. I walked over, took the sword from his hands, and placed it in the referee's weapon rack. Then I returned. The world resumed. Kashin swung. Empty air. Weapon unavailable. Skill cancelled. The crowd laughed. Kashin's face tightened. He reached to the secondary sheath on his back. Shorter sword came free. Next turn, skill selected. Crimson draw. I took that sword too. This time I placed it beside the first. Weapon unavailable. Skill cancelled. Kashin stared at his empty hands. The referee stared at the growing weapon rack. Cauldress stared at me like he could create fire through irritation alone. Kashin drew a third blade from inside his boot. I blinked. That seems uncomfortable. He roared and selected attack. I took the blade and replaced it with a wooden spoon from a refreshment table beside the arena. The world resumed. Kashin completed his dramatic draw holding a spoon. The laughter became a roar. Even Seraphina, watching from the competitor balcony, looked away to hide her expression. Kashin stared at the spoon. I raised both hands. I did not know where else to put it. He surrendered before his next turn. Winner 0, method, opponent withdrawal. Item discrepancy under review. Tournament officials hurried onto the field after the second match and surrounded me with detection rods. A judge in a striped robe held one against my chest. No mana. A second checked my shoes. No enchantment. A third examined the referee's weapon rack where Kashin's blade sat in a perfectly legal row beside the wooden spoon. Items recovered. No storage magic detected. Cauldress watched from above while the officials failed to produce an accusation. The final judge cleared his throat. No prohibited skill has been identified. The commoner stands applauded. The noble stands did not. I picked up the spoon and offered it to the judge. Evidence, he stared at it. Put that down. I returned it to the refreshment table. The scoreboard added a new line beneath my record. Cheating violations, 0, unexplained violations, 27. That result somehow made Cauldress angrier than a guilty verdict would have. The third match was supposed to be different. Cauldress chose the opponent himself. A summoner named Valak entered with a massive white beast walking beside him. It resembled a lion with plated shoulders and a golden horn across its forehead. Suncrest Leon. Class Epic Summon Bond Loyalty 96. Valak stopped 10 tiles away. This is not a school pet, he said. It will not abandon me for a snack. The crowd murmured. I looked towards Seraphina. She gave the smallest shake of her head like she was warning me the beast was actually dangerous. Valak selected Command Beast. Crushing charge, the lion lowered its plated head. A red path cut across the arena. The action paused. I walked toward the beast. Up close, it was enormous. Its shoulder reached my chest. Golden light burned between the plates around its neck. I did not see a treat prompt this time. I did see a metal thorn trapped beneath one front paw. The beast had been hiding the pain while standing in formation. I crouched, lifted the paw carefully, and pulled the thorn free. The lion's frozen eyes remained fixed ahead. I rubbed the fur beneath its chin and stepped out of the charge path. The world resumed. Valak shouted, "Crush him." The Suncrest Leon charged 3 steps, then stopped. It looked at its paw, looked at me, then walked over and sat beside me. The arena went quiet. Valak's face broke. What did you do? The beast pushed its massive head against my shoulder hard enough to move me half a step. A system message appeared. Pain source removed. Temporary gratitude status acquired. Attack command refused. The commoner stands erupted. Students pounded the railings. Someone began chanting white blur. Others joined. The name spread around the arena until even the nobles could not pretend not to hear it. Cauldress stood rigid at his podium. The audience was no longer laughing at the failed summon. They were laughing at everyone sent to expose him. Between rounds, the crowd began making a game of it. A handwritten betting board appeared near the commoner rail. What will disappear next? Sword 3-1. Flag 5-1. Prince's podium, even odds. Leora saw the board and pointed at the final line. Do not encourage them. I have not touched the podium yet. Cauldress noticed the betting board too. He ordered a guard to remove it. The guard entered a dialogue prompt with the bookmaker. While they waited for the transaction to resolve, someone added a new option. Prince's dignity already gone. The commoner stands shook with laughter. Cauldress pretended not to read it. Valak recalled his beast and left without looking at me. The scoreboard updated 0, 3 wins. Damage received 0, mana used 0, valid class actions 0. Cauldress raised one hand. The royal dialogue lock pressed silence over the arena. Enough preliminary games, he said. I looked at Leora. He is going to pretend those were planned. he is already doing it. Caldress continued. The next match was selected to remove every false explanation. Your opponent does not rely on fixed targeting, unfinished barriers, carried weapons, or beast commands. Wind moved across the arena. Green threads appeared between the pillars. The competitor gate opened. Seraphina stepped through in white and blue armor, one hand resting on the hilt of a narrow sword. The cheering changed, not louder, sharper. Everyone knew her rank. Everyone had seen her nearly touch me before. Caldress smiled for the first time all day. Seraphina Veyer, he announced, the fastest registered duelist in the academy. Seraphina looked at Caldress. I did not accept this match for you. His smile weakened. She turned toward me. I accepted because I want the answer. The tournament board changed. Special match White Blur versus Wind Duelist. Prediction field authorized. Caldress sat down slowly. He was still smiling. But one hand disappeared beneath his podium, and somewhere under the arena floor, a hidden set of golden runes began to wake. Seraphina did not draw her sword immediately. She walked to the center of the arena and placed one hand against the stone. Wind spread from her palm. Hundreds of green threads rose around us, stretching between pillars, flagpoles, railings, and the transparent barrier surrounding the field. Some hovered near the floor, others crossed at shoulder height. A few formed a web above our heads. The system recognized the spell, persistent field, wind lattice. Function, detect displacement, pressure change, and route interruption. Duration, continuous. My smile faded slightly. Continuous effects were becoming a problem. The auto-counter boss had used one. Now Seraphina had turned the entire arena into one. She finally drew her sword. The blade was narrow and silver with no heavy decoration. I will say this once, she told the crowd. Zero does not teleport. Murmurs spread through the stands. Caldress leaned forward. Seraphina kept her eyes on me. He crosses every step, pushes air, creates force, and gets tired. And if his route can be read, his arrival point can be attacked. That last part was for me. I rolled my sore hand once. Leora had healed the worst of the damage from the dungeon, but the knuckles still remembered the Guardian's core. You make me sound less mysterious. Mystery is what people call a rule they have not measured yet. You and Velmorin would get along. That is not a compliment. The referee raised one hand. Dual condition: first disarm, surrender, or incapacitation. Lethal force prohibited. Persistent field approved. Seraphina's portrait entered the top of the turn bar. Mine appeared below it as a broken square. Zero, error, the referee began. This time I did not move before the first word finished. I waited until Seraphina's command loaded. Skill selected. Wind needle array. 12 needles formed behind her. Targeting lines did not point at me. They pointed at openings in the lattice. Roots, the action frame paused. I stepped right. 3 threads bent. 4 needles shifted to cover the exit. I stopped. The threads trembled. The needles adjusted again. Seraphina had not guessed one destination. She had turned the arena into a machine that guessed all of them. I backed up 2 steps, then burst left. The nearest threads snapped around my shoulders. Needles launched before the world fully resumed. I ducked under one, twisted around a second. A third cut through the edge of my jacket. The fourth struck the tile in front of my shoe. I stopped so hard my heel carved a line through the dust. The crowd went silent. Seraphina had not hit me. She had made me stop. Seraphina changed the lattice after that. The green threads stopped forming clean lines and began rotating in slow circles around the arena. Every root I disturbed created a wave that traveled outward, reached her position, then returned from another angle. She was no longer only reading where I crossed. She was measuring when. Her next needle grazed the skin below my jaw, a brief sting. A thin red line, no worse than a paper cut. Still, the crowd reacted like a castle wall had fallen. White Blur had been touched. Seraphina did not celebrate. She watched my face, waiting to see whether pain would make me repeat the same escape route. I almost did. The body's first answer to danger is usually the familiar one. Instead, I stepped toward the needle path, let the rotating threads register the wrong timing, then dropped flat beneath the return wave. The next 3 attacks crossed above me. I rolled onto one knee and moved before the dust settled. My shoulder brushed a thread. Seraphina turned. I stopped again. She stopped too. For half a second, both of us waited outside the rhythm the arena expected. Then she laughed once, a short sound, surprised more than amused. You are learning. I am trying to keep the rest of my jacket. She attacked again. Her next turn began almost immediately. Registered speed advantage. Priority bonus, Wind Duelist. She moved 4 legal tiles while the lattice guided her. To everyone else, she was the fastest person in the arena. To me, she was still slow, but her spell was not. I crossed behind her. The threads bent. She turned before my hand reached her sword, not fully and enough. Her blade swept through the space where my wrist would have been. I pulled back. A pressure line touched my skin. No cut, close, the crowd erupted. For the first time, they were not laughing. They were watching a fight. Seraphina reset her stance. Straight routes will not work. I noticed. Repeated rhythm will not work. Also noticed. Then show me something else. That sounded fair. The previous matches had left objects around the arena. 2 flags, a wooden spoon. Torn ribbon from the opening ceremony. Sand kicked loose near the boundary. Cashin's swords had been returned, but the empty weapon rack remained beside the referee. I moved during Seraphina's next action pause, not toward her, toward the black flag. I tore 1 strip from the cloth and ran it through 3 wind threads. Then I crossed to the opposite side and dragged the ribbon through 5 more. Every thread bent. The needle array split toward the false roots. I stopped behind a pillar. The world resumed. 6 needles attacked a flag. 2 struck empty air. The last 4 searched for me. I moved again before the lattice settled. Seraphina adjusted faster than the academy exercise. She sent a low wind pulse through the floor. Dust rose around my feet, revealing each contact point. Smart. I stepped onto the base of the weapon rack instead of the ground. No dust. The rack tilted. I rode it for half a second, jumped to the flagpole base, then changed direction again. The lattice filled with overlapping trails. Seraphina's eyes moved constantly, reading every bend. She was still following. My legs started burning. That was new too. Against frozen guards, I had moved in short bursts. Against the dungeon boss, the fight had ended with 1 committed charge. Seraphina was forcing me to move, stop, reverse, and accelerate again before my body recovered. No mana bar appeared beside my name. I had something less convenient, lungs and calves, a heartbeat that did not care how unfair the world was. Seraphina saw my breathing change. There, she said. Her sword glowed. Skills selected, crosswind step. Instead of firing where the lattice bent, she moved to cut off the route I would choose when tired. The world paused. I saw the trap. Every easy path led away from her sword and into a needle line. The only safe route went straight toward her. She wanted me close. I smiled. Then I did nothing. The action frame stretched. Seraphina's prepared route waited. The needles waited. The crowd waited. I stood still outside the turn order. For once, refusing to move was the unpredictable option. Seraphina's legal action had to resolve. She crossed the arena and cut through empty space. The needles fired at routes I never entered. Her momentum carried her 2 steps past me. I moved then, not fast, 1 ordinary step. I reached for her sword. She twisted the hilt away. The lattice warned her. I let it. My other hand caught the loose blue wire still looped around my belt from the dungeon chest. I tossed 1 end through the wind threads behind her. The threads bent sharply. Seraphina's attention shifted for a fraction of a second. I changed height, stepped inside her guard, and tapped the flat of her blade upward. She held on, strong grip. Wind wrapped around her wrist. I could have struck her arm. I did not. Instead, I moved behind her during the next command pause, took the free end of the wire, and looped it around the sword's crossguard. When the world resumed, Seraphina pulled the blade toward herself. The wind threads pulled the wire the other way. For 1 instant, her own lattice became a second opponent. Sword left her hand. It spun once and landed point first in the sand between us. The system flashed. Disarm confirmed. Winner, 0. The last exchange cost more than I wanted the crowd to see. My breathing sounded too loud inside my own head. The muscles along my legs trembled whenever I held still. Each acceleration demanded more force than the last because Seraphina never gave me enough time to settle into 1 pace. She looked tired too. Wind magic pulled at the ends of her hair, but her sword hand stayed steady. That mattered. Everyone else I had faced relied on the system to make them dangerous. Seraphina used the system, but she also thought beyond the option it gave her. If I humiliated her like Cauldress, I would only be punishing the first person in this world who had treated my ability as a real problem instead of an insult. So when the sword left her hand, I did not move it to the weapon rack. I caught it by the wrapped grip, turned it once, and offered it back hilt first after the system confirmed the disarm. She accepted it without looking away. The gesture drew a different reaction from the stands, less laughter and more respect. Even the noble students who disliked me understood that I had chosen where the joke ended. No one cheered immediately. The arena remained silent while the wind lattice faded 1 thread at a time. Seraphina looked at her empty hand, then at the sword, then at the blue wire running through her own spell anchors. You used the field against me. I bent over slightly, catching my breath. It was a very helpful field. You also waited. I am capable of patience in emergencies. She pulled the sword from the sand and sheathed it. No anger and no excuse. She stepped closer and lowered her voice so only I could hear. If I can read you, others will learn. They will use continuous effects, prediction fields, traps that do not need a turn. I glanced toward Cauldress. The prince sat motionless at his podium, too motionless. His right hand was hidden beneath the table. A thin golden line ran from the base of the podium into the arena floor. Seraphina followed my gaze, her expression sharpened. That was not part of the approved field. The crowd finally erupted. White blur chants rolled through the commoner stands. Students shouted Seraphina's name too. The match had not made her look weak, it had made both of us look dangerous. The scoreboard updated, 0 tournament finalist. Mana used, 0 class actions, 0 illegal movement events, 1842. Serafina stared at the final number. That cannot be accurate. It feels judgmental. The referee stepped between us. Match complete. Competitors returned to starting. Caldress pressed something beneath his podium. The sentence cut off. A hidden prompt opened under the arena. Royal override accepted. The tiles around my feet flashed gold. Serafina reached toward me. 0 do not step. I had already shifted my weight. My shoe touched the next tile. Golden substance surged out of the seams like liquid light. It wrapped around my soul, climbed my ankle, and hardened instantly. For the first time since entering this world, the turn order bar found my name. 0 an initiative assigned. A command menu opened in front of me. Attack, defend, item, and surrender. Across the arena, Caldress slowly stood. His smile had returned. Now, he said, you wait for your turn. The cheer around us lasted exactly long enough for Caldress to hate every second of it. He stood near the royal box with one hand resting on the railing. No speech this time and dramatic accusation. No public insult that gave me a convenient box to walk around. That was the first sign he had learned something. The second sign was the floor. A thin golden line appeared under my right shoe. Not a targeting line, not a spell circle. A tile. Serafina saw it at the same time I did. 0 move and I tried. For one strange half-second, nothing happened. My body understood the command. My muscles fired. My balance shifted. The world simply refused to accept the step. The golden line spread around my ankle and hardened like glass. A system window opened in front of me. Unregistered unit detected. Applying temporary synchronization, my smile faded. Caldress finally let himself breathe. The arena floor lit up in a perfect square around me. Every exit path sealed. Every loose object outside the boundary dimmed. The turn bar, which had ignored me since the moment I arrived in this world, flickered. Then my portrait appeared. 0, class, none, status, synced. A command menu loaded in front of my face. Attack, defend, item, surrender. The crowd stopped cheering. Leora's hands hit the barrier. Serafina's wind threads snapped toward the trap, but a referee prompt blocked her before she could cross the line. Caldress smiled like a man who had finally found the pause button. Now, he said, you wait for your turn. Now, Caldress said, you wait for your turn. I hated him for being correct. The golden substance around my ankle hardened until it looked like clear amber. Light ran from the trap into the arena floor, through the referee's platform, and up to the royal podium. For the first time since I entered this world, my name appeared on the turn bar. Prince Caldress, 0, Serafina, and referee. My portrait sat beneath Caldress's with a small chain wrapped around it. Status, turn locked, movement, unavailable. A command menu floated directly in front of my face. Attack, defend, item, surrender. I stared at it, then I tried stepping left. My body did not move. It was not paralysis. My legs still had strength. My mind still gave the order. Reality simply refused to process it. Movement unavailable. Await active unit. The crowd was no longer frozen around me. People shifted in their seats. Nobles leaned forward. Commoners stood. Leora ran to the arena boundary and struck the barrier with both hands. 0, Serafina reached for her sword. A referee command snapped over her. Match interference prohibited. Her hand stopped 1 inch from the hilt. Caldress spread his arms toward the stands. There is your miracle, he announced. A cheap movement trick defeated by one lawful field. The nobles cheered as if they had personally invented glue. I looked at the menu again. Do I at least get settings? No response. Skip animation, nothing, and uninstall. The surrender option glowed faintly. Rude. Caldress's portrait flashed. Active turn, Prince Caldress. He stepped down from the royal platform and onto the arena. The sticky field recognized him immediately. Field controller, royal authority, Prince tier. The referee's face tightened. This field was not approved for tournament use. Caldress did not look at him. As Crown Prince, I approve it now, royal override acknowledged. The referee's objection box dimmed. That explained why Caldress liked this world so much. His bad decisions came with administrative access. He raised one hand. Flame gathered over his palm, brighter and denser than Darius's academy fire. It twisted into a long spear with a white center. Royal Flame Art Sunpiercer, target 0, a red line stretched from the spear to the center of my chest. Usually I would have moved the caster. Or the target marker and Caldress's boots. This time the line stayed attached to me. Leora searched through her support menu so quickly the windows overlapped. Heal, guard aid, and emergency assist. All unavailable, target is outside support priority. Serafina shouted, the arena shield will reduce lethal damage, but that spell can still break bones. Caldress smiled, then he should select surrender. My menu remained gray, it was not my turn. I finally understood what the boy at the street crossing had felt. What Leora felt when Caldress threatened to seal her action rights. You could see the danger. You could know exactly what to do. You simply were not permitted to do it yet. Cauldress released the spear. The world did not pause for me. The white flame crossed the arena. A tiny prompt opened at the edge of my vision. Defensive response available. Window 0.4 seconds. Defend. It was the first legal action the world had ever offered me. I selected it. My body unlocked for a single response. No shield appeared, no class skill activated. I had no defense stat worth mentioning. So I used the only thing I had. My body moved, not freely, only within the narrow response the system allowed. I twisted sideways and raised one arm. The spear missed the center of my chest. It struck my shoulder instead. Heat exploded across the arena. The impact threw me to the edge of the tile and drove one knee into the ground. My jacket sleeve blackened. Pain ran down my arm in a hard, bright line. Arena protection activated. Health 64/100. The crowd went silent. Cauldress looked happier than anyone should look after doing 64 points of damage. Leora's face had lost all color. Seraphina stared at the trap, not the flame. She understood what mattered. The field had not made Cauldress stronger. It had made me ordinary. Cauldress lowered his hand. How disappointing. The unbeatable white blur has the durability of a commoner. I rolled my shoulder once. Pain answered. That was your strongest royal flame. His smile vanished. Good, my portrait flashed. Active turn 0. The command menu brightened. Attack, defend, item, and surrender. Attack showed a red warning. No valid target within basic range. Defend would keep me alive for another round. Surrender pulsed like it was desperate for attention. Then there was item. I selected it. The arena scanned everything physically on me. Item list: apple stem, anomaly token, royal sovereign seal. The apple stem was tempting for emotional reasons. The anomaly token remained locked behind a black warning. Use unknown. That left the small golden seal I had taken from beside the king's plate during my first duel. The item description opened. Royal Sovereign Seal. Authority: King tier. Function: validate, transfer, or revoke royal control. Possession: unauthorized. The noble stands erupted. The royal seal, he stole it from the palace. The failed summon robbed the king. I looked toward the royal box. The king was not present, but every official around Cauldress recognized the item. Velmorin stood so quickly his chair slid backward. Cauldress's expression changed. For the first time, the prince did not look angry. He looked nervous. That seal does not belong to you. I selected it. Neither did the trap. A new window covered the arena. Higher authority item detected. Current field authorization. Prince tier, sovereign confirmation missing. Illegal royal override detected. Cauldress looked up. No, cancel that. He reached for his control prompt. It grayed out. Lower authority request pending. Please wait. I almost laughed. The system turned back to me. Apply sovereign audit to active field. Confirm. Cancel. I pressed confirm. Golden lines raced across the floor. The trap scanned me first. Seal bearer detected. Registration: none. Class: none. Royal blood: none. Valid field target: no. Then it scanned Cauldress. Registered royal unit detected. Field activation source detected. Unauthorized override detected. Reassigning legal responsibility. The amber around my ankle cracked. Across the arena, Cauldress's boots lit gold. His smile disappeared. No. The trap flowed away from me in shining streams and surged around him instead. It climbed both legs and locked him to the royal control tile. My portrait vanished from the turn bar. Cauldress's gained a chain. Status: turn locked. Royal violation under audit. A command menu opened in front of the prince. Defend, appeal, item, and remain silent. The last option felt custom-made. The pain in my shoulder remained. So did the burn across my sleeve, but the pressure holding the world in place was gone. I stood. Cauldress tried to step back, movement unavailable. Await active unit. I walked across the arena. Slowly, not because I had to, because he had spent the entire day waiting for this moment. It seemed polite to let him watch it arrive. Cauldress selected appeal, request denied. He selected it again. Duplicate request detected. Please wait. The prince's eye twitched. I stopped directly in front of him. The sticky field held him upright with both arms slightly spread. Like the arena had decided to display its worst decision as a warning. You cannot touch me, he said. I am the crown prince. A dialogue box appeared beside his face. Prince Cauldress, you cannot touch me. I am the crown prince. I looked at the box. Then at the glowing appeal option, then at his forehead. I am not attacking. I raised one finger. I am providing feedback. I flicked him. I held back. Mostly, the speed behind the motion still made the air pop. Cauldress left the control tile, crossed half the arena, and landed in the padded wall beneath the royal seats. The sticky field released him only after he had already folded into the cushions. Damage: 12. Dignity: unavailable. I did not know whether the second line came from the system or the crowd. Either way, the commoner stands exploded. White blur chants rolled around the arena. Academy students joined in. Even several noble students who had spent the morning laughing at me now covered smiles behind their hands. Liara reached the arena the moment the barrier dropped. She stopped in front of me, looked at the burned sleeve, and lifted both hands. Healing light wrapped around my shoulder. "You are impossible," she said. "That has been officially confirmed." Serafina stepped through the opening behind her. Her eyes moved from the royal seal in my hand to Cauldress in the cushions. "You kept that the entire time?" "I forgot it was there until the menu insulted me." "That is not reassuring." The tournament board flickered above us. "Final result under review." Cauldress pushed himself upright. "Invalid," he shouted. "The match was corrupted by stolen property." The royal seal glowed. "Sovereign audit record found." "Illegal field activation." Prince Cauldress. "Ownership reversal. Valid." "Victory condition. Opponent removed from arena." "Winner 0. Tournament champion 0. Error class. Turnless 1. The board stamped the result in gold. The crowd cheered louder. Cauldress stared at his own system like it had betrayed him personally. Velmorin descended from the observation platform. Headmaster Orland followed, wearing the expression of a man trying very hard not to enjoy royal humiliation. Velmorin stopped near the broken edge of the sticky field. "He did not overpower it," the Archmage said. Cauldress pointed at me. "He cheated. He presented a higher authority item. The field audited its activation source. Your own override failed." "You are defending him." "I am describing what happened." That answer hurt Cauldress more than an insult. Velmorin looked at me. "You defeated the round law from inside a legal command." I pressed item. "You recognized the field had ownership." "I recognized your prince looked scared of the seal." Velmorin closed his eyes for 1 second. "Of course." Low-rank students crowded the railings. Servants at the arena doors stood taller than before. The same people who had lowered their heads whenever nobles passed were looking directly at the royal box. Not because I had become their king. Not because they thought I was a hero. They had watched the system confirm that a prince could be wrong. That was enough to change the air. Cauldress noticed too. He climbed out of the cushions and pointed at the crowd. "Silence. The tournament is suspended by royal." The first church bell rang. The sound crossed the city like a blade drawn slowly from a sheath. Every system window in the arena dimmed. A second bell followed. The crowd stopped cheering. A third. The sky above the academy turned white, not bright and empty. Color drained from the banners. Wind stopped moving through the open arches. The tournament board closed itself and disappeared. Temple guards entered through all 4 gates. Their armor was pale gold. Their faces were hidden behind smooth masks. Each carried a staff topped with a circular symbol divided into 12 equal spaces. They did not receive visible turns. They moved together. At the north gate, the crowd separated without being ordered. A man in white robes walked into the arena. He looked young until I saw his eyes. They were calm in the way deep water was calm. A ring of symbols floated behind his head, rotating 1 space at a time. "Round Saint, voice of divine sequence. Authority, sacred." Cauldress straightened immediately. "Your Holiness." This anomaly attacked the royal family and corrupted the tournament. The saint did not look at him. He looked at me, not my face. "My missing place in the turn order. You are 0. Apparently, you possess no mana." Popular topic today. No class. Still none. No divine blessing. I was beginning to feel left out. The saint's expression did not change. "You misunderstand. Absence is not freedom. Absence is a hole." The arena grew colder. Liara's healing light weakened around my shoulder. Serafina shifted her stance. Velmorin opened the round index, but the pages refused to turn. Sacred authority override. The saint stepped onto the arena floor. "I have reviewed the palace log, the district audits, the academy trials, the dungeon record, the tournament violation." Cauldress smiled behind him. The saint continued. "You did not cheat." Cauldress's smile collapsed. The crowd stirred. I raised an eyebrow. "That is unexpectedly reasonable. Cheating requires participation in the law being broken." The ring behind his head rotated. "You do not participate." A massive white window opened over the academy. Sacred judgment sequence. All registered units. Assume reverence. The entire arena moved at once. Nobles knelt. Students knelt. Guards lowered their staffs. Commoners dropped to 1 knee. Leora's body locked beside me, one hand still raised toward my shoulder. Serafina froze with her fingers inches from her sword. Velmorin's floating pages snapped shut. Cauldress knelt too. He looked offended by the equality of it. I remained standing. The saint watched me. I took 1 step. The air pressed against my body. Not a turn pause, not a command waiting to resolve. The space itself had become thick, every inch carrying a continuous order. Unauthorized movement detected. Correction pressure applied. My second step felt like walking through deep water. A pale line burned across the floor beneath my shoe. For the first time, the round law was not waiting for me. It was pushing back. The saint's voice filled the arena without becoming louder. The world survives because every action has a place. Another ring of symbols formed over the city. Every voice has a time, the pressure increased. Every life has a value the law can measure. I looked at Leora, forced to kneel beside nobles who had called her a servant. Then at the commoner stands, then at Caldrus. He had a higher score than all of them. Apparently that meant the world should listen to him first. The saint raised one hand. A world with an unregistered actor cannot remain stable. A white target symbol appeared over my chest. It must correct him. The symbol tightened, or erase him. White tiles spread across the arena. They did not appear one at a time. They were simply there, covering every route between me and the round saint. Sacred ground. Effect: continuous turn synchronization. Unauthorized movement. Slowed. The important word was continuous. There was no command pause. No casting animation waiting for confirmation. No frozen moment where I could walk behind the saint and borrow his halo. The field existed before I moved and stayed active after I stopped. I tested the nearest tile. My foot crossed the edge. Golden threads wrapped around my ankle and dragged my speed down until the world around me moved normally. A temple guard raised his staff. Passive response, repel anomaly. The staff fired without receiving a turn. I twisted away, but the force caught my side and threw me back across 2 tiles. Arena protection absorbed part of it. Health, 51/100. Leora made a sound through clenched teeth. Her body remained locked in reverence. Seraphina's eyes tracked every holy tile, searching for a route that did not exist. The saint watched without satisfaction. That made him worse than Caldrus. Caldrus wanted to win. The saint wanted the correction to feel inevitable. I rose carefully. Your world really does add more rules whenever it starts losing. The rules were always present, he said. You were merely beneath their notice. I rushed the left path. The sticky tiles slowed me. The passive barrier fired. I changed direction. A second response waited there before I arrived. The impact caught my arm and forced me back again. Prediction updated. Movement pattern recorded. Seraphina saw it. The field is using my wind data. The saint glanced toward her. Your academy reported the anomaly's displacement paths. Divine order makes use of all valid knowledge. Seraphina's expression turned cold. I did not give you permission. You are a registered noble. Your knowledge already belongs to the system that formed you. A gray command appeared over her. Remain still. She could not answer. The saint turned to Leora. Her support crest was glowing faintly despite the sacred lock. Support healer Leora. She looked up. Your dungeon record shows unauthorized contribution. Premature movement. Aid outside assigned priority. Leora's face tightened. The saint extended one finger. Support exists to preserve active units. It does not choose which actions deserve priority. A command box opened in front of her. Kneel, remain silent, await healing order. Caldrus looked pleased again. Of course he did. The saint continued. You were assigned a servant function. Return to it. I moved between them. The holy floor caught my feet, but I kept going until my body blocked his line of sight to Leora. Another passive strike charged. Talk about her like that again, I said, and I am stealing the halo. The saint released the strike. I braced. Before it hit, green light flashed behind me. Emergency assist. The force still struck my shoulder, but the impact softened. Instead of throwing me across the arena, it pushed me one step. Everyone turned toward Leora. Her command box remained in front of her. Kneel, remain silent, await healing order. Her hand had moved anyway, only an inch, enough to complete the support sign. The saint's eyes narrowed for the first time. How? Leora's voice came out quietly. He was in danger. That does not grant you initiative. It always did. A new window opened over her crest. Emergency support functions may interrupt lethal action. Authority approval required. Leora looked at the final line, then at me, then at the commoner stands where hundreds of people remained forced to kneel. I have seen that warning since I awakened, she said. Every healer has. Velmorin's eyes moved sharply toward her screen. Leora continued. We can move early when someone is about to die. We can pull an ally forward. We can delay an enemy's status. We can change who acts next. The saint's voice hardened. Only under authorized command. Yes, her fingers trembled. That is what they taught us. The support menu opened wider. Heal, guard aid, emergency assist, and priority relief. The last option was gray. Restricted, low contribution unit may not alter action order. Leora stared at it. At the academy, she had been left outside the party because her score was too low. In the dungeon, her name had been placed last even when only she could see the traps. At the palace, Caldrus had threatened to seal her right to act at all. She lifted her hand. Saint gave a command, remain still. Leora pressed priority relief. The system rejected it. Insufficient authority. She pressed it again. Request denied. Again, warning, repeated unauthorized request. The saint raised his staff. Stop. Leora looked directly at him. No, the word entered the square before his command finished. Her crest cracked with green light. Emergency condition recognized. Linked encounter, sacred judgment sequence. Support targets all suppressed units. The saint had placed the entire arena inside one judgment scene. One encounter, one linked field, that was his mistake. Leora selected everyone. Priority relief activated. Green rings spread from her feet. They passed through the noble seats, the student balconies, the temple guards, and the commoner stands. Nothing dramatic happened at first. Then the little boy from the street crossing, standing beside his mother near the lower gate, moved his hand. Caldress was in the middle of shouting an order. The boy moved before the prince finished. The crowd saw it. His mother saw it. The system saw it. Low priority unit acted before noble dialogue resolution. Recalculating, a murmur crossed the arena. Not after Caldress's box closed. During it, Caldress stopped talking. Leora's knees lifted from the floor. Seraphina's fingers reached her sword. The saint struck his staff against the tiles. Restore sequence. Sacred authority surged. Leora staggered, but her spell remained. It is temporary, she gasped. I cannot remove the field. You do not have to, Seraphina said. Her legal action window opened. She drew her sword and sent wind across the arena. Not at the saint, across the holy tiles. Dust, banners, loose sand, and heat moved through every lane at once. The prediction field tried to read thousands of displacement paths. Prediction targets 1, 7, and 43. Error. Holy response markers flickered. I moved. The sticky ground still slowed me, but Seraphina's wind forced the field to recalculate faster than it could settle. Leora's relief spell opened tiny legal gaps under my feet, one tile and then another. The saint raised both hands, divine judgment. A white symbol appeared on the floor beneath me. Target confirmed, 0. Above the arena, light gathered into a blade wide enough to split the platform. The saint expected me to attack him. Instead, I followed the target line. The floor symbol was not just light. At its center sat a small circular marker engraved with the same 12-part design as the temple staffs. A target token. I reached it during the final confirmation frame. The saint's passive barrier struck toward me. Seraphina bent the prediction path. Leora advanced my action one place. I lifted the token. The light in the sky followed it. I carried it 3 tiles to the right and set it at the base of the enormous church statue overlooking the arena. The world resumed. Divine judgment descended. The saint looked up. The church statue took the full strike. Stone and white light burst outward. The giant circular halo behind the statue split down the middle. Its raised hand broke away and crashed into the empty clergy platform. No one was harmed. The symbol of perfect order was not so lucky. Judgment target destroyed. 0 valid church monument invalid. The crowd stared at the broken statue. I brushed white dust from my jacket. I warned you about the halo. Behind the shattered stone, a hidden crystal mechanism had been exposed. Old blue pages spilled into the air. Not church scripture, system records. Velmorin's round index opened by itself. He stepped toward the floating archive, eyes widening as dates, commands, and version numbers unfolded. Civil priority table, contribution hierarchy, action delay assignment. A line at the bottom flashed red, original sequence modified. Velmorin looked from the record to the saint, then to Leora. His voice was almost too quiet to hear. This was edited. Velmorin pulled the archive apart with both hands. Layers of old commands spread over the arena. The first version of the round law was simple. Combat initiative, dungeon movement, spell resolution, emergency healing priority. Nothing about nobles, nothing about commoners, nothing about who was allowed to cross a street first. Then a later record opened, civil sequence expansion. Authorized by Royal Council, Temple of the Round. Mana contribution linked to speech priority, travel priority, petition priority, education access, and action delay. The date was more than 3 centuries old. The crowd read it with him. No one needed an archmage to explain what it meant. Nobles did not merely have stronger magic. The world had been edited to let them act first. Velmorin opened another file, support priority override. Original function, all healers may interrupt dangerous sequence. Revision, restricted by contribution rank. Leora stared at the words. Her spell was not a miracle. It was not a forbidden evolution. It was something her class had always been able to do before someone decided people like her should need permission. The round saint faced the crowd. Order prevented collapse. A commoner shouted back before receiving a dialogue prompt. So you delayed us on purpose. Another voice joined. My daughter waited outside a healer's hall while nobles passed her. A third. My petition has been pending for 11 years. The saint raised his staff. Silence. The command appeared. It did not fully resolve. Leora's green rings still moved through the arena. People kept speaking. Caldress surged to his feet. As Crown Prince, I command every citizen to. The little boy near the gate turned to his mother. Do we have to listen? His voice crossed Caldress's unfinished dialogue. The prince stopped. That might have been the first time in his life someone spoke over him without exploding. Velmorin looked toward the sky. The round index pages had begun closing on their own. Something is accessing the archive. The broken church crystal pulsed black. Every open menu in the city vanished. For one breath, the world had no interface at all. Then the sky opened. A command window larger than the academy descended over the capital. System arbiter. Core sequence integrity compromised. Anomaly identified. 0. Title TURNLESS 1. Classification persistent external actor. A beam scanned me. Assigning initiative. Failed assigning class and rogue. Rejected Mana 0 and speed mage. Rejected Mana 0 and spatial walker. Rejected no displacement event. Heretic. Rejected not a class. The window paused. Classification none. Caldress looked almost offended on the system's behalf. The arbiter tried again. Forced registration initiated. My status screen flashed. Name 0. Class none. Mana 0. Turn position unavailable. Forced registration failed. Correction level increased. The reveal did not stay inside the academy. The archive projected itself through every official screen connected to the round law. At the south gate, workers watched their own crossing delays appear as policy entries. At the healer's hall, patients saw the queue rules that had kept them waiting behind nobles with minor scratches. At the academy dormitories, low-rank students saw petition requests they had filed years ago, still marked as pending because their contribution value was too low to force a review. One old woman in the market stared at a glowing record that showed her son's appeal had not been denied. It had never been allowed to reach a judge. The city became quiet in a way no command could have caused. People were not merely angry, they were counting the years the system had taken from them. Caldress tried to speak over the rising sound. His dialogue box opened, but too many people were already talking. For the first time, the prince's words had to compete with everyone else's. The ground shook. The academy walls dissolved into white squares. Benches, banners, broken stone, discarded weapons, and loose objects vanished into locked storage. Streets beyond the arena folded into a perfect grid. The entire district became one sealed battlefield. No chairs, no swords on the ground, no target markers I could casually borrow. Clean tiles stretched in every direction. A final message filled the sky. Full patch correction, delete invalid movement, restore contribution priority, erase external actor. The last loose piece of the broken church statue disappeared. The battlefield gates closed. For the first time, the world had removed everything I usually used against it. The system arbiter did not have a face. It did not need one. Its commands appeared everywhere at once. Battlefield sanitized, loose objects locked, dialogue interruption disabled, boundary exit. Sealed prediction model loaded. Red lines covered the grid, not one targeting line, hundreds. Every route from my tile led through an auto-counter zone. Wind patterns moved above them, copied from Seraphina's academy records. Black rings marked the same illegal approach trigger used by the dungeon guardian. The arbiter had studied every time I won. Seraphina looked up at the moving lines. It combined my lattice with the dungeon counter. Imitation is flattering. That is not imitation. It improved it. Less flattering. I tested one burst to the right. The red lines shifted before my foot landed. Auto counter armed. Prediction correction 87%. A blade of white force appeared exactly where my neck would have been. I stopped so hard my shoes scraped sparks from the tile. The blade passed 1 inch ahead of me. The arbiter updated, prediction correction 91%. I stepped back. Okay, it is a quick learner. Across the grid, Leora's green support rings began shrinking. The arbiter assigned everyone new positions. High contribution units, priority restored. Low contribution units, delay increased. Leora's portrait dropped to the bottom of the turn bar. The commoner stands grayed out. Civil units, spectator lock and remain still. The little boy's hand froze inside his mother's. The saint lowered his head in relief. Caldress smiled. Caldress saw the battlefield sanitize itself and mistook it for rescue. He straightened his torn coat, lifted one hand, and stepped toward the nearest royal command window. As Crown Prince, I assume emergency authority. The arbiter scanned him. Royal unit detected. Contribution. High historical command abuse. Severe. Caldress froze and what? Emergency authority request. Denied. Reason, local royal interference contributed to anomaly escalation. For one heartbeat, the prince looked more wounded by the word denied than by every fall, flick, and public humiliation combined. The arbiter did not hate him, it simply did not need him. That was worse. All his life, Caldress had believed the world bent because he deserved it. Now the world had decided he was an inefficient tool. His portrait slid to the side of the turn order under a gray label. Protected asset, command input disabled. I looked at him. Congratulations, I said. You finally became furniture. He opened his mouth. No dialogue box appeared. The arbiter had exposed the lie and then chosen to restore it anyway. That told me everything. It did not care whether the hierarchy was fair. It cared whether the commands were stable. Serafina received one legal action. She spread wind threads over the grid. The prediction field reacted immediately, drawing false routes toward every current. Do not use the obvious openings, she said. The empty lanes are bait. It wants you to choose the path with the fewest counters. Then I choose the most annoying path. That description is not specific enough for you. Velmorin stood outside the nearest counter ring with the round index forced open between his hands. The pages tried to close. He held them apart with raw mana. 0. I looked toward him. The arbiter appears simultaneous, but it is not. A list of commands flashed over his shoulder. Sanitize field, assign priority, calculate prediction, arm counter, process correction, and delete anomaly. One after another, very fast, still one after another. It must resolve valid commands in sequence, Velmorin said. It cannot finalize the next state until the previous one is accepted. The arbiter heard him. Archmage access revoked. The round index snapped shut and knocked Velmorin backward. But I had seen enough. The final boss had removed the chairs, the banners, and the weapons. The convenient prince-shaped objects. It had not removed the commands. It had filled the entire battlefield with them. Ownership, targeting, prediction, priority, rewards, and boundaries. Class assignment and deletion. Every command needed an answer. Every answer created a waiting point. I looked at the royal seal in my pocket, then at the anomaly token. The token had been created because the dungeon could not explain me. One side showed a broken clock, the other showed an empty class crest. The arbiter had called me persistent. That meant even the system had records it could not erase cleanly. Leora struggled against spectator lock. Serafina held the wind lattice open. Velmorin forced himself back to his feet. The arbiter began the final command. Patch deletion, preparing. I smiled. No loose objects, fine, the interface was full of them. Serafina moved first. Wind spread across every red lane. The arbiter calculated 12 possible routes for me. Then 20, then 64. Prediction correction dropped. 91%, 73%, 48%. Leora's portrait remained at the bottom of the turn bar. She opened emergency assist anyway. Restricted. She pressed it. Priority relief, unauthorized. She pressed it again. The green ring beneath her feet expanded one tile. The arbiter turned toward her. Support violation detected. That was one more command. Velmorin forced the round index open and selected the archived civil priority table. Protected record access requested. Another command. I pulled out the royal seal. Sovereign item detected. Battlefield ownership review required. Another. Then I pressed the anomaly token against it. Persistent anomaly reward detected. Deletion conflicts with recognized title. Recalculating and another. The arbiter's clean battlefield filled with windows. I moved during the ownership review. A counter line snapped toward my first route. Serafina bent it with wind. I changed direction and lifted a targeting symbol from the tile ahead of me. The arbiter tried to correct the missing marker. Target not found. Nearest valid target, system barrier. The auto-counter struck its own wall. Correction barrier damaged. I crossed the broken tile. The arbiter opened a dual boundary around me. Participant containment active. I stepped out before registration finished. Participant missing. Boundary result invalid. The old palace error returned from system history. Winner, 0. The arbiter attempted to close it. The anomaly token demanded the unresolved dungeon reward window. Reward forcibly assigned. Title, turnless one. The royal seal demanded field authority. Current controller, system arbiter, sovereign dispute pending. Cauldress tried to help. As crown prince, I order the anomaly to remain. I walked outside his dialogue target. Speech target missing. Continue anyway. His box remained open. The arbiter tried to process the speech, the duel, the reward, the ownership dispute, and the deletion request at once. It could not. Menus multiplied across the sky. Leora's priority relief finally found a valid emergency. System stability, critical, all linked units. In danger, her spell spread through the crowd. Commoner portraits moved upward. A woman stepped out of spectator lock. Then the old medicine seller, then the boy and his mother. Low priority units acted before noble command resolution. Recalculating, Serafina released every wind thread at once. The prediction field placed me on dozens of tiles. Anomaly location 3, 11, and 29. Error, I crossed the final counter ring. The arbiter issued deletion. Patch target, 0. The royal seal marked me as an active sovereign claimant. Protected authority cannot be deleted during audit. The anomaly token marked me as a system-recognized persistent reward. Recognized title cannot be deleted during recalculation. Error class marked me as having no class record to remove. Turnless 1 marked my unregistered movement as persistent. The arbiter tried to simplify the battlefield, so I made it remember everything. I reopened the palace duel record and left the result unresolved for 1 frame. Participant left combat boundary before first action, then the district audit, unreported funds detected, then the academy classification. Class error, then the dungeon reward, invalid clear time accepted. Then the tournament field, sovereign ownership dispute. Then the sacred judgment marker, target destroyed, church monument. Each record was valid, each one described the same person differently. Failed summon, white blur, error class and turnless 1, unregistered unit and external actor. The arbiter attempted to merge the labels into 1 deletion target. The system refused itself, cannot delete unit during unresolved reward, cannot reward unit during active ownership audit, cannot audit unit without class registration, cannot register unit with mana 0. Cannot assign class none to valid participant, cannot invalidate historical victory after public confirmation. The sky filled with contradictions. For once, I did not need to move faster than the world. I only needed the world to read its own paperwork. The sky flashed black, invalid states exceed correction limit. All counters froze, not permanently, long enough. Velmorin dragged 1 final command out of the old archive and enlarged it over the battlefield. Civil action priority, current value, mana contribution. Applied to speech, movement, petition, education, medical access, and legal response. That is the control layer, he shouted. The original combat law is beneath it. The arbiter tried to hide the command. Leora held the priority window open. Serafina cut the concealment lines with wind. I reached the center of the grid. A crystal rose from the floor. Inside it, every turn bar in the city rotated around 1 command. Contribution equals priority. 2 options appeared: delete round law, remove civil priority layer. The arbiter recovered behind me. Patch deletion resumed. I placed my hand on the crystal. The world waited for my choice. For once, I did not press the funniest option. Destroying the round law would erase more than noble privilege. Dungeon seals would fail. Healing sequences would vanish. Monster boundaries would open. Every system people depended on would collapse with the one they hated. So I left the battle rules, I left spell resolution, I left the parts that kept dangerous things contained. Then I selected the line someone had added later. Civil action priority, mana contribution and remove. The crystal asked for confirmation. I pressed yes. The command shattered, the world did not freeze, it changed. Leora took a step without receiving permission. Leora stood still for several seconds after the command broke. Not because she had to, because she was waiting for the familiar pressure to return. It did not. Her support menu opened on its own. Heal, guard aid, emergency assist, and priority relief. No gray restriction covered the last option. No warning told her to wait for a noble, priest, examiner, or prince. She touched the menu with 2 fingers and laughed once, small and disbelieving. Serafina lowered her sword beside her. That was reckless. You are going to have to be more specific. She looked at the city, where people were still learning how to move without being sorted first. I was talking to the entire world. Velmorin stood near the broken core crystal, reading the rebuilt round index. Combat order remains stable, he said. Dungeon containment remains active. Healing sequences remain active. Civil priority is gone. He looked at me over the pages. You removed only the added layer. I am lazy, I said. Destroying the whole world sounded like extra work. For the first time, Velmorin smiled like he was not sure whether he was allowed to. Then he closed the round index himself. No prompt asked permission. The boy near the gate crossed in front of a noble officer, then stopped only because he chose to. Commoners spoke over one another, confused by the sound of their own uninterrupted voices. Caldris climbed onto the broken podium. As Crown Prince, I command every citizen to remain and hear. His dialogue box appeared, no lock followed. People walked away, one by one, then all at once. Caldris continued speaking to an empty arena. Leora laughed. Serafina lowered her sword. Velmorin watched the new turn bars rebuild without civil ranks attached. My status remained exactly the same. Class, none. Mana, 0. Turn position, unavailable. Good. I looked across the city as people moved without waiting to be told they mattered. This world, I said, is finally playable. Far above us, one hidden window remained open. External actor, unclassified and monitoring continues.